Special good morning to all members of the Youth Parliament who represent the next generation of leaders in our country, hopefully. And I must say, when I look around, I like the complement of male and female. The distribution of male and female is welcome in this place. I don't know if it's a 50-50 distribution, but it's very near to that. And I'm hoping that that signals to the nation what the youth of the Bahamas wishes to see in the future in terms of representation in this honorable house. The Bahamas is on record as hosting the first youth parliament in this region. The first regional youth parliament was held in the year 2000 in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And ever since that time, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Conference has hosted a youth parliament. Many countries also within our region host their own youth parliament as you are hosting today. So I'm going to be rather brief because today is your day. Today is your day to put the issues forward that you feel are important, particularly to your generation and to the preserving of what we have as a nation and the development of the various constituencies that you would be representing here today would need for the advancement of our nation. Just briefly, I want to say to you as the Speaker that the role of the Speaker, in my estimation, is a relatively easy role, with the exception that in this political environment, we can expect it to be an adversarial environment. The role of the Speaker is to maintain the decorum in Parliament, to maintain the dignity of the institution, and to make certain that members, while representing their constituencies and their constituents to the highest level, maintain not only that decorum, but abide by the rules of conduct within this Parliament. And the Bahamas Parliament started some 288 years ago in 1729. And so we have an unbroken, strong legacy within this region. And I look forward to a lively, and as one radio talk show host would say, provocative debate. And I know that the Speaker that you would elect would maintain the decorum and hold you to the rules. And so with that, I welcome all of you to the 2018 Youth Parliament. And just before I turn this matter over to you, I wish to recognize a number of parliamentarians who are present. I wish to recognize the Member of Parliament for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, and I wish to recognize the Member of Parliament for Pinewood. I don't get the opportunity too much as the Member of Parliament for Nassau Village. I see you've removed my... there she is. The Member of Parliament for Nassau Village. I don't get the opportunity to participate in the debates. And on many occasions, I call on the member for Pinewood and the member for Marathon, the member for Seabreeze, and the member for South Beach to represent the concerns for Nassau Village to this Parliament. And so I wish to now order that the Youth Parliament be officially started. When I rise, you rise.
Honorable members, I now accept nomination for an honorable member to be elected as Speaker.
I nominate the member of finance to be Speaker.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the honorable member for St. Anne's be elected Speaker. As many as are in favor will sit, those opposed will stand. The honorable member for St. Anne's has been elected as Speaker.
That Constitution states that respects spiritual values. So let us exhibit the scripture reading for today's 17th session of Youth Parliament. Leviticus 25, verse 1 through 4. And it reads, While Moses was on Mount Sinai, the Lord said to him, Give these instructions to the Israelites. When you have entered the land I am giving you as an inheritance, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord every 7th year. For 6 years you may plant your fields and prune your vineyards and harvest your crops. But during the 7th year the land will enjoy a Sabbath of rest to the Lord. Hands the scripture reading.
Thank you, Lord.
Let us bow our head in reverence for prayer. Oh God, our Father, we come to you in reverence and submission. We thank you now for this announcement for the 17th session of Youth Parliament. You are the God of our forefathers and truly indeed the God of this nation. And we thank you for strength, and we ask that you give us confidence to speak as youth parliamentarians today on behalf of concerns of this nation and it will be resolved. We thank you for today. We thank you for all things and your protection for this great land we call the Bahamas. And we pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Let us now say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Honorable members, I am not unmindful of the honor which you have conferred on me today, in electing me to this highest office, that of your Speaker and your servant. It will be my aim and duty to uphold the principles and traditions of this House and secure for each member the right to express his or her opinions within the limits necessary to preserve the decorum of this House. I pledge to recognize the rights and privileges of the honorable members and the House itself. I will assure that I would preside in a manner which will facilitate the transaction of debate in an orderly fashion. And above all, I will seek to be fair and impartial in the decisions, the rules of this Parliament, and yourselves entrusted to me. I invite the honorable members to elect from among yourselves a member to be Deputy Speaker of this Youth Parliament.
Mr. Speaker,
The Chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the honorable member for Central and South Abaco be elected as Deputy Speaker.
Is there a seconder?
Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the honorable member for Central and South Abaco be elected as Deputy Speaker of this Youth Parliament. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. The honorable member for Central and South Abaco has been elected Deputy Speaker of this Youth Parliament. Resolutions. The Chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to move the following resolution. Whereas the unemployment rate among youth in the Bahamas has remained considerably higher than any other age group, according to a senior statistician in the Department of Statistics. Though there was a slight decline in the rate from 25.1% in November of 2016, it remained as high as 24.1% in August of 2017. And whereas in January of 2018, unemployment among young people 15 to 24 years in the country continued to be considerably higher than any other age group. And whereas in May of 2017, the Inter-American Development Bank reported that the unemployment rate among young people in the Bahamas peaked as high as 30%. Whereas, according to the International Monetary Fund, the 2008 global financial crisis had an especially strong effect on the unemployment rate for those between the ages of 15 and 24 in the Caribbean, which jumped on average by 5 percentage points between 2007 and 2013, from 21% to 26%. In some countries, youth unemployment rates are nearly 3 times that of those aged 30 and over. And whereas, according to the 2012 UN Caribbean Human Development Report, young people are both the primary victims and perpetrators of crime in the Caribbean, and crime has risen sharply since 2004, where murder rates are now among the highest in the world. Whereas the International Monetary Fund reports that youth unemployment and crime are a part of a vicious cycle where weak economic growth reduces economic opportunities for the young, increasing their vulnerability to victimization or gang membership. These trends further hurt economic growth by discouraging investment through lower productivity, higher security costs, and reduced competitiveness. They also divert government spending from growth-enhancing investments in health, education, and productive infrastructure to crime fighting. This diversion of government funds creates uncertainty for businesses and investors and can cause the immigration of highly trained people, also known as brain drain. And whereas the government of the Bahamas has borrowed $20 million to fund the Citizen Security and Justice Program, a multifaceted crime and violence prevention initiative that has, as a part of its core strategy, the training of vulnerable, unemployed youth in the Bahamas. Whereas, through this very same Citizen Security and Justice Program, the Ministry of National Security signed a contract with the National Training Agency on October 17, 2018, to provide training for hundreds of young, unemployed Bahamians. Whereas the government fully understands the connection between unemployment and crime, the government remains concerned about the rate of unemployment in the Bahamas, in particular, the high rate of unemployment among our young people. Be it resolved that the members assembled of the 17th session of the Bahamas' annual National Youth in Parliament will debate the challenges, concerns, and benefits of implementing policies that affect youth unemployment in the Bahamas. It will consider the root causes for why such policies must even be debated and offer viable, possible policy models and its attendant legislation to improve employment for youth in the country. And be it further resolved that this youth parliament recognizes that youth unemployment is a part of a vicious cycle that leads to increased rates of crime, slowed economic growth, and brain drain, affecting the young and old alike. And adequate and progressive steps must be taken to mitigate and reverse the effects of youth unemployment in all sectors of Bahamian society. An unemployed existence is a worse negation of life than death itself, Jose Ortega y Gasset. This morning, I rise to represent the diligent people living in the even more marvelous constituency of Pine Ridge on the industrial capital of this archipelago. In order to fix a problem, we must know the reasons for said problem. In order to know the reasons for said problem, we must evaluate. And in order to evaluate, we must ask ourselves the question, what are we doing now, Mr. Speaker, that we could have done differently? The problem at hand is that of youth unemployment. Unemployment is like the ocean, constantly rising, and if we do nothing, it is only a matter of time, Mr. Speaker, before we meet our timely and deserving demise. As the resolution states, youth unemployment is a part of a vicious cycle that leads to increased rates of crime, economic growth, and brain drain. The sad truth, Mr. Speaker, is that we do not groom entrepreneurs, we raise employees. We teach students how to fill in job applications instead of how to make business plans. This leads to a frenzy in recent and long-time graduates because without an employer, what are they to do? We only depict one avenue to success, and that is the avenue of education. Because of this, Mr. Speaker, without job opportunities, the only thing the youth can do is wait or create their own. What if we implemented strategies to equip these adolescents with the necessary mindset and skills to flourish in our presently struggling economy? More businesses, more job opportunities, a higher GDP, and lower unemployment rates are what we are striving for. What has been put in place, Mr. Speaker? The summer job and 52-week programs that rarely hire these individuals after? Have we looked at why this is? If this avenue made to cure cannot be improved, why not make avenues made to prevent? Firstly, in order to form businesses, we must groom entrepreneurs able to perform basic business procedures. If we made business management and administration a mandatory subject, instead of being able to find the two real solutions of an equation to the second degree, all of which we learn in mathematics that most of us will never use after graduation, we can instead make a business plan, calculate our break-even points, and know our fixed costs, etc., for our prospective businesses. The results? productivity increases, more business variation, and a rise in competitiveness. With adequate financing, Mr. Speaker, and investments, we can have an economic boom. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, what else can we do to combat this dilemma facing our youth? I suggest that we monitor our education system better. We are consciously failing our students. Why do we continue to allow 11th grade students to advance to the 12th, knowing they do not possess the necessary qualifications for the national high school diploma? If they cannot get it in the 9th grade, nor the 10th, nor the 11th, what makes you think that they will be able to get it in the 12th? In the words of Facebook personality, ain't nobody can believe that. Their minds are made up. The strategies need to be implemented to assist those underachievers, because if not, the high school dropout rates will continue to rise. What if we made a way to segregate the academically inclined from those who aren't? The reality is, according to the Department of Statistics, youth unemployment in November of last year was at 22%. This was probably because we put them in a lane that they were not capable of running. The implementation of individualized curriculums would prepare each student for their prospective future. Results would include better graduation rates, rise in confidence levels, and lower unemployment rates. Isn't this what we want, Mr. Speaker? Lastly, to further assist the urbanization of our little third world nation, let's form organizations similar to Junior Achievement, assisting in the development of that entrepreneurial mindset that we need. Yes, you may say Junior Achievement already exists, but JA only exists to those students with a 3.0 and above, or those with recommendations. It is not for those who thrive in their trade, whether it be culinary, mechanical, or cosmetology, but fail to reach the standardized academic requirements. Programs similar but offered to all can be beneficial to these individuals, giving them abilities that can help them independently further themselves, thus lowering youth unemployment. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, these are some measurements that we can take to improve youth unemployment rate and results to increased rates of crimes, slowed economic growth, and brain drain, affecting the young and old alike. With that being said, I thank you for your time, Mr. Speaker.
Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the great people of Exuma, Exuma Keys, and Ragged Island. I am most grateful for the opportunity to voice my concerns on the pressing issue of youth unemployment. We often hear the cliche, the youth are the future of our nation. As accurate as this might be, it seems clear to me that many of our young people are seeing their future snatched away from them because of a lack of opportunity. In the Caribbean, youth unemployment is considered among the highest in the world. For example, as a result of the crisis, Jamaica's overall labor force decreased by 2.7% in 2010. This resulted in the loss of 16,000 jobs for youths between the ages of 14 and 24 from October 2009 to October 2012. Sadly, the Bahamas among the countries associated with high unemployment of youth between the ages of 15 through 24. This is an age where most young persons are typically in the realm of developing a future. According to the Department of Statistics' recent labor force survey, the growth in employment numbers was not sufficient to cover the net increase in available labor with school leavers entering the workforce, leading them to marginal growth in the unemployment rate from 9.9% to 10.1% compared to the last period under review. Fortunately, we are experiencing a time of harvest in Exuma, but even here, the reality on the ground is that too many of our young people are not fully engaged meaningfully in building our nation. The Ministry of Education's motto for this year is understanding the whole picture and imaging the finished results. Do we as a society, with reference to our youth, understand the whole picture with respect to unemployment? Are we aware what the finished results should look like? I realize that this issue of unemployment with our youth is multifaceted, and there are several factors that may have numerous solutions to them. This morning, I come to speak on the importance of education and its role with youth with unemployment. Standing firm as an educator, I am hoping to shed some light on how education affects the high unemployment rate of our young people in this place we call paradise. Although I am not limited to this discipline, I am more passionate and informed with respect to this area. Thus, I beg your indulgence as I present to you 3 important areas with respect to education's connection with youth unemployment. They are social promotion, curriculum design, training, and development. According to the article in the Canadian Guardian, social promotion is the practice of advancing students to the next grade after the current school year, regardless if they learned the necessary material or if they were absent. Mr. Speaker, you might be asking yourself, what does social promotion have to do with unemployment? In my humble summation, this element brings to the fore the reality that a child that lacks the basic skills which should be attained through the educational system is now at a disadvantage to function and compete in the working world. The obvious solution is to make these students repeat, but because of the volume of them, this may be impractical. Additionally, I am not naive to the economic challenges that our country faces with respect to the cost of educating a student from grades 1 through 12. Nonetheless, in light of this difficulty, we need to make a better effort to invest in our students to ensure that they are becoming successful, contributing members to the Bahamian society. It must be noted that it is said that there are students that slip through the cracks of our educational system. I disagree, not with the meaning of the phrase, but I challenge the use of the word cracks. To use this word would suggest that it is a minor issue when it is no longer a crack, but it is a blue hole, Mr. Speaker, whose evidence can be seen in our morally decaying society. Therefore, we need to pull together all stakeholders in this regard to address and re-strategize with respect to other avenues to enhance our educational system in light of challenges of social promotion, bringing me to my next point, Mr. Speaker, which is curriculum and design. The Nassau Guardian article states, following an in-depth study into the public school system, the Ministry of Education's officials have found the dropout rate has risen year over year to unsatisfactory levels among the high school students. In my modest opinion, Mr. Speaker, part of the issue is we need to make our educational system more relevant to our students. At the crux here in the Bahamas, our educational system has been very low to adapt to the needs of students when compared to other Caribbean and international public schools. In other parts of the world, technical and vocational training is instituted much earlier at the high school level. A number of studies also find that programs with strong focus on employment are more likely to be successful within the school curriculum. In particular, this means ensuring that our education system aligns with the needs of the labor market, which is tourism, engages employers in design and delivery, builds in support for transition to work, and ensure individuals can continue training after job entry. Lastly, I would like to elaborate on training and development. The design of today's curriculum is fashioned in a way only to support those who are academically inclined to pass examinations and meet the appropriate grade point average to succeed. Though this aspect is essential and has merit, I looked in depth at the National High School Diploma and its accommodations to students who are struggling to meet the obligations. Mr. Speaker, what are we doing with the other percentage of students that do not possess the academic skills to pass the National High School Diploma? As an educator, I am convicted that we incorporate within the curriculum entrepreneurial skills and workforce development. By doing this, we are creating now an outlet for these students to be equipped with skills upon graduation that can be rewarded not just as a leaving certificate, but as a skilled professional. which is greatly needed in our family islands, especially the Exuma and Ragged Island, of whom I well represent. Therefore, there is a need to advocate for and engage professionals, inclusive of the self-taught, to come to grips with the idea of teaching young people to provide a service or at large a business. Mr. Speaker, in light of everything that was discussed with respect to our youth unemployment, I have now presented one aspect in the form of education that has been discovered as the root of the ongoing issue of unemployment. So, Mr. Speaker, I end by highlighting the aforementioned solutions with respect to education's relationship to youth unemployment, which include social promotion, curriculum design, training and development. Truly, if we hold these in mind, we can mold a better Bahamian. I thank the fine people of Exuma and Ragged Island once again for making me their voice here today. I am most grateful. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed to. Whereas the unemployment rate among youth 15 to 24 in the Bahamas has remained considerably higher than any other age group, according to a senior statistician at the Department of Statistics. Though there was a slight decline in the rate from 25.1% in November 2016, it remained as high as 24.1% in August of 2017. Be it resolved that the members assembled of this 17th session of the Bahamas' annual National Youth Parliament will debate and have debated the challenges, concerns, and benefits of implementing policies that affect young people and employment in the Bahamas. We have considered the root causes for why such policies must even be debated and offered viable possible policy models and its attendant legislation to improve employment for youth in the country. And be it further resolved that this youth parliament has recognized that youth unemployment is a part of a vicious cycle that leads to the increase in rates of crime, slowed economic growth, and brain drain, affecting the young and old alike, and that adequate and progressive steps must be taken to mitigate and reverse the effects of youth unemployment in all sectors of Bahamian society. As may, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I begin my contribution, I'd like to request 30 seconds to address some condolences on behalf of this youth parliament.
Granted.
Thank you. I want to briefly pause and recognize the departure of a former parliamentarian who sat in one of these very seats before any of us had even arrived on this earth. Mr. Speaker, political differences are secondary to love and unity. I pray peace, therefore, upon the soul of Bradley Roberts, peace for his family, and peace for our nation. Thank you for that time. Mr. Speaker, on most Mondays through Fridays, I'm a graphic designer. Today, I've been granted authority to speak for the interests of my home community of Freetown. But every day, Mr. Speaker, I get to call myself a young Bahamian, and that is the greatest privilege of them all. The resolution before us, Mr. Speaker, is not a unique or surprising issue. Youth unemployment has been a persistent challenge to our economic potential. As an older member of this particular session, Mr. Speaker, I have painful and personal experience being an unemployed young person. Mr. Speaker, my bachelor's degree is in advertising and marketing, and if I may, I want to present a marketing plan for this session to consider. Every good plan starts with research, but here presents our first stumbling block, Mr. Speaker. Though we are all well acquainted with the frightening levels of underachievement in our national exams, our quantitative outputs on why these phenomena occur are a lot less clear. In short, Mr. Speaker, we know the numbers, but we don't know a lot beyond that. My professional recommendation to the government, Mr. Speaker, is to get this first step right and spend what it takes to get a wider range of data for national consumption at the next census. Mr. Speaker, after the research comes the target market. This one's easy. All of our measures must focus on addressing Bahamians under the age of 35, which, according to our last census, Mr. Speaker, represents over half of our population. Third in the plan is a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Mr. Speaker, to avoid overstating the obvious, I'll only briefly mention one negative. We're threatened by a brain drain that sees the Bahamas lose almost 2 out of every 3 tertiary educated Bahamians to other economies, Mr. Speaker, as stated by the Interdevelopment Bank in 2014. I can say, Mr. Speaker, as a recent college grad, the statement is no overestimation. On the flip side, however, there are pillars of strength that we can use, like the intellect of yourself, Mr. Speaker, and the other members that we will hear from today. Multiply our numbers by 16 previous sessions, and add that number to the hundreds, if not thousands, of young Bahamians with degrees, Mr. Speaker, and we have a starting point for a youth-driven think tank. Our biggest opportunity is to direct the young talent we already have to lead into places commensurate with their skills. Mr. Speaker, the strategy is the meat of the marketing plan. To address one of the most fundamental causes of youth unemployment, Mr. Speaker, we must ensure that our young people are employable by the standard of 2018. It is beyond justification, Mr. Speaker, that I didn't learn about resume writing and free networking tools like LinkedIn until 3 years after I had graduated high school. This, Mr. Speaker, should have been taught at the secondary level. After all, tragically, a majority of young Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, do not continue to the tertiary level. The template for such a life skills course that could also include the basics of personal finance exists internationally. As an overdue measure, Mr. Speaker, I recommend a thorough audit of the national education curriculum by educators, recent graduates, and business leaders, not political appointees, that will remove or add mandatory courses based on one standard alone, Mr. Speaker. The effectiveness of that course in improving the self-reliance or employability of the student. Mr. Speaker, in any marketing plan, analytics and real-time analysis are just as important as the other components. We must make policy based on evidence, Mr. Speaker, not political whim. It's going to be expensive. And while I never advocate the government throws more money at endless programs under different names, Brett Henry was correct when he said, Mr. Speaker, that no other investment yields as great a return as the investment in education. He says further, an educated workforce is the foundation of every community and the future of every economy. My final recommendation, Mr. Speaker, to this end, is the establishment of a minimum benchmark or percentage amount of young Bahamians in each government ministry. This would be a part of a wider affirmative action plan for Bahamian youth, with a component, Mr. Speaker, similar in function to Kenya's National Government Affirmative Action Fund. That initiative, Mr. Speaker, seeks to provide socio-economic empowerment to vulnerable Kenyan communities through financial support. And, Mr. Speaker, a Bahamian interpretation can zero in on our vulnerable youth, who have historically been left to the ebb and flow of the macroeconomic tide. Mr. Speaker, it's time to do this the right way. Correct a systemic deficiency and eventually inspire our best and brightest to come back home and kickstart this economy. I know, Mr. Speaker, that I've come home with that hope. But if I'm being honest with you, I'd rather be at home playing Fortnite right now. But that would mean ignoring matters that I know affect my constituents. And, Mr. Speaker, I can't do that. What a sad example of privilege it would be for me to choose to be idle when too many of my colleagues have no choice but to be idle with no good job of their own. And as I prepare to take my seat, Mr. Speaker, I expect that we will continue holding our real-life parliamentary counterparts to task, and that one day one of us, Mr. Speaker, will etch the solutions we propose here today into law. Thank you for your time.
As many, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Central and South Abago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before this honorable house represent the great and amazing people of Central and South Abaco. Mr. Speaker, how do you feel when you turn on your television and you notice that the next young person is being escorted to Her Majesty's prison because of theft, criminal offenses, rape, drugs, and murder? Don't you sometimes ask yourself, where is the next generation? Because it hurts, Mr. Speaker. All of these negative actions that I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, are all caused because of youth unemployment. What does youth unemployment mean? According to Wikipedia, youth unemployment is defined by the United Nations as the unemployment of young people ages 15 to 24 years old. Mr. Speaker, it is up to us as youths to take a stand against this ferocious disease that causes our youths to be engaged in the negative activities. Youth unemployment can be caused by several factors, including lack of education, dropout of school, lack of training skills,
bad government policies, limited job opportunities, and lack of qualifications. Mr. Speaker, it is up to the government to help the youth tackle the strong epidemic that is handicapping our young people in this day and time. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, we can tackle youth unemployment by implementing more scholarships to students who would love to gain a higher education. We can give it to students to study abroad or nationally. And if that child is receiving a scholarship to a foreign college, then it is mandatory, Mr. Speaker, that they come back home and help us to grow our nation. When we do this process, the student can now come back and instill in the future generation. Mr. Speaker, on the family islands, we can also construct more hotels that can help the economy to grow and help the youths, Mr. Speaker, who are searching for jobs. We can also implement offices that can help these youths to find jobs as well. Mr. Speaker, if we create more jobs on the family islands, young people do not have to leave their islands, Mr. Speaker. They can stay and work and be closer to family. And many times, Mr. Speaker, these young people, they leave young children behind. And we know, Mr. Speaker, when there is not a father figure in the house, it is troubling sometimes, Mr. Speaker. Finally, we can implement programs to our curriculum that help students to know how a job interview is conducted, how they must dress a job or an interview, and more partnership programs that can help students to receive jobs upon graduation if they cannot afford to attend colleges or universities. Mr. Speaker, when would we invest in more of our youth? When will we support the youth in everything they do? And when will we help them to become better citizens of our great Bahama land? Mr. Speaker, when will the adults grow up, Mr. Speaker, so they can show us the example that we need to follow? Mr. Speaker, when would the fathers take their places in the homes so the young men can follow? Mr. Speaker, it is time that we stand up in this honorable house and say enough is enough. We have tolerated this epidemic too long, and we cannot afford it anymore. This negative action that is taking over our youth needs to stop. And Mr. Speaker, yes, Jamaica might have the highest. Yes, the Bahamas might come in second. Yes, the other Caribbeans might not want to do something. But us as youth who stand in this honorable house, we who are representing the young people, we need to stand up and take action because we are leaders. We are not followers, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, as ambassadors to the Abacunians and change, I am asking that the government invest more in youth and stop putting the topic on the back burner, but cross the Red Sea, Mr. Speaker, so we can show the world this is a new Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, I would love to end by saying there are no more turning backs because our youth are the future. I would also love to end by quoting the late Whitney Houston when she said in a song, I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be. So, Mr. Speaker, let us take our places and tackle this epidemic that is handicapping our young Bahamian people. May God continue to bless this great nation that we all admire, that we call the Great Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr.
Speaker. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Aucklands.
Thank you for acknowledging me, Mr. Speaker. We cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Mr. Speaker, as I rise on a topic that has been in some cases swept under the rug, and in other cases tried and failed, I wish today to speak on behalf of the lovely people of the great island of Auckland, as a voice and as a representative for my people that could not be here to speak for themselves. Mr. Speaker, I wish to call on the leaders that have implemented temporary jobs and programs for our youth. An example of such would be the 52-week Skills Empowerment Program, which has been going on for almost a decade. According to www.bahamas.gov.bs, the 52-week Skills Empowerment Program 2018 is a job initiative of the government of the Bahamas to provide unemployed persons between the ages of 19 to 30 years old with hands-on skills to find gainful employment based on the training received. Mr. Speaker, I wish to recognize the attempts of the government, past and present, that came up with and executed this program. My question, however, is why is this program only 52 weeks? After their time has expired, what are young Bahamians fresh out of high school with zero job experience left to do after such a program? Seeing that this program enabled them to train, work, and get paid, why didn't they allow such persons to have jobs permanently? Mr. Speaker, the people of Auckland are very appreciative of such a great program as the aforementioned. However, we wonder why we work so hard and prosperous, doing above and beyond for a job that is not ours permanently. Shouldn't these islanders at least be considered to work in a capacity that they were trained in, seeing that their jobs were done exceptionally well? Mr. Speaker, as the honorable member stated, according to a senior statistician at the Department of Statistics, the unemployment rate among youth 15 to 24 years old in the Bahamas has remained considerably high. Further decline in the rate from 25% in November 2016 to slightly move to 24.1% in August 2017 proves there was a revelation of some sort. However, 24.1% is still high. I then have to ask, what are schools doing to prepare students for the workforce? We find ourselves doing E=mc² and learning what chemicals we can put together to make a volcano explode, but who teaches us how to apply for jobs, how to create resumes, how to prepare ourselves for this fast-changing world? Mr. Speaker, we as a country suffer because we are ignorant, and that simply means that we do not know. No one said it better than Ellen Wilkinson when she said, and I quote, "Unemployment is bigger than a political party. It is a national danger and a national scandal," end quote. Fortunately, the Bahamas governments, past and present, have been made aware of this ill and have again tried to improve it. I fear, however, that they have in their attempts failed to understand how detrimental and serious this ill is. Mr. Speaker, I wish to recognize the government, specifically the Ministry of National Security, for signing a contract with the National Training Agency on October 17, 2018, to provide training for hundreds of young, unemployed Bahamians. How many of our youth on islands such as the Exumas in Ragged Island, Moriah, and Long Island, to name a few, are aware of such agreements? How many of these same youth are social media gurus and attend school regularly and have no idea of the acts, laws, and contracts being made and signed on their behalf? You'd expect the media to be in the favor of the millennials, with technology being a great source of information and the internet being the biggest and best library available to these same youth. How many ads on KFC and commercials of Super Wash that washes you, brushes you, cleans you 24/7 How many ads on KFC and commercials of Super Wash that washes you, presses you, and cleans you 24/7, do we have to skim through and look over in order for them to find a program designed with them in mind?
Honorable Member.
Chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair now recognizes the honorable member for Centerville, for St. Anne's, sorry.
Mr. Speaker, it is my belief that we were given 2 ears with which to listen and 2 eyes with which to see, but only 1 mouth to speak, for a very good reason. Mr. Speaker, I have listened to the stories of my constituents with my 2 ears, and I have seen the plights that affect young people in this country with my 2 eyes, and it is time for me to speak with my 1 mouth, with every iota of dexterity in my tongue. To this country, in this broadcast, in this house concerning our youth. My grandmother once said, if you are dumb, my son, you are dangerous. Mr. Speaker, there are many dangers walking around this country today. They are dangerous to their families by way of burden. They are dangerous to their communities by virtue of a lack of issues that they bring. They are dangerous to this country through a lack of contribution. And we have got to, Mr. Speaker, by hook or by crook, graduate from the ignorant perspective that our country must do for us, neglecting to ask instead what we can do for our country. We must educate this nation out of miscommunication by the use of information to bring greater liberation. Educate their teachers, but they instruct them in the way. We must retrain the brains of our people so they abandon the preconception that youth equals incompetence and must institute information sessions for every single member of the public and private service so they are equipped to confront the concerns of young people. Mr. Speaker, every year more than 1,000 young Bahamians graduate with degrees in psychology. Why don't we put them at the forefront of change? Tell me, what is stopping us from establishing a nationwide initiative of psychological professionals for the advancement of the thinking of this nation? I believe that secondary schools should be in cahoots with government agencies so that we may offer more practical avenues for employment. We do not need another doctor, lawyer, or Indian chief. What we need, Mr. Speaker, are movers and shakers, civil engineers. Civil engineers to design the first skyscraper in Grand Bahama. Ethical hackers that can work to put the Bahamas on the map by having the most secure financial system in the world. Research scientists to create the cure for AIDS and geneticists to reverse Bahamian autism. Yes, my good people, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. Let us use this initiative to guide young people into the careers and fields which they love so that in their passion they can pursue greatness regardless of the circumstance. Let us be part of the solution, detaching from the problem. Let us establish true and charitable mentoring programs for our vivacious and gifted young people in this nation so that they do not leave school swollen with unnecessary information and discombobulated by the real world and real issues and real careers and real stress. Mr. Speaker, I know what it is to be taken for a joke. I know what it is to be written off by the people who I thought were my salvation. But Mr. Speaker, I press on. I press on in the face of adversity to inspire our youth to do the same. I press on in the hopes that this government will take initiative to empower young people through certifications geared towards the professionalization of the young man and woman so that they have paper behind the promise. But here is the kicker. When my people are not undereducated, they are overeducated. I hear the cries of my constituents ringing in my ears after coming from colleges around the world that they cannot be paid for the skills with which our Heavenly Father has blessed them. I hear the cries of their parents who see potential in their children that remains untapped because it is not even being acknowledged. Mr. Speaker, I smell systematic oppression in this country, and it is a stench which I cannot bear. And so, Mr. Speaker, in the case brought before this court of the people versus mediocrity, youth are the plaintiffs, you are the bailiff, I am the litigator, and the judge is the Bahamian public. And I accuse the thought of limitation itself for the murder of untapped greatness in this country. Therefore, Therefore, we arrest the social state of incompetence, arrest the point of joblessness, arrest the darkness, and bring forth the light so our young people may have life and have it more abundantly. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I believe that God's greatest gift to man, with 2 arms, 2 legs, a brain, and a voice, we may not annoy him, but help him to help us to help ourselves. Let us rebuild this country. Let us reinstate intelligence. Let us reconstitute our passions. And let us close down the devil's workshop for idle hands. Forward, upward, onward, and together. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Englishdam.
Mr. Speaker, proudly I rise before this erudite body on behalf of the reputable people of Englishdam. It is my task to disseminate pivotal contributions to the proposed resolution at hand in effort to mitigate the alarming rate of youth unemployment in our country. Permit me, if I may, to commend the government of the Bahamas for the establishment of the Security and Justice Program, which has been instrumental in providing prospective young professionals ample exposure to relevant workplace experiences and instructions through a structured curricula. Be that as it may, Englishdam vehemently disagrees with the government's decision to borrow $20 million to fund the Citizen Security and Justice Program. To continue such a trend would be catastrophic on behalf of our government. According to the 2017 National Budget Review, the present debt is already a staggering 67.8% of the gross domestic product. Furthermore, the Department of Labor notes that this program aims to increase employment among at-risk youth only in New Providence. And if it were to be done on a nationwide scale, only 1,350 young people would benefit. Mr. Speaker, would it be of any impartiality for family islanders and the remaining percentile of youth for the government to allocate such a large quantity of money toward a program that will only benefit persons living in the capital? I think not, Mr. Speaker. I fully understand that this move was made to avoid the diversion of government funds and the cost it can incur. However, the government should identify a budget in their national employment policies that prioritizes current chronic youth employment. Mr. Speaker, Englishdam recognizes that youth unemployment is a global phenomenon, and the Bahamas is no exception. Based on youth employment trends in the Bahamas as of 2014, the Inter-American Development Bank identifies these factors as significant gaps between the level of skill development of youth and a lack of work experience. Mr. Speaker, I am advised that these factors are sparked by the implementation of policies such as the Statute Laws Employment Act, which prohibits the right for an individual under the age of 18 to gain full-time employment. I am aware that this policy was implemented to ensure that young persons are not deprived of a formal education nor exploited by unjust labor practices. However, this policy is inequitable to individuals who complete high school before the age of 18. This policy impedes their eligibility to work and acquire the experience needed to develop a professional career. Coupled with, this policy defeats the purpose of the government's investment in the skills for current employment for future jobs in the Bahamas initiatives, which, according to the Department of Labor, targets the unemployed school leavers between the ages of 16 to 29 years. Mr. Speaker, while regulations are tools that safeguard vulnerable groups of people in society, these same measures often serve as double-edged swords, stifling the youth's ability to gain appropriate employment. Conversely, I proffer that in agreement with the 2017 Bahamas National Youth Policy, our government, in collaboration with stakeholders, should engage educational institutions and local enterprises to provide specialized programs that will equip our youth with essential job-related skills that will be instrumental not only in them gaining experience and future employment, but crucial in them preparing themselves to serve our country.
As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I contend that further progressive steps ought to be taken to mitigate the effects of youth unemployment in our country. As it stands, there are current policies implemented which adversely affect youth employment. But we are confident we will implement policies that solidifies John F. Kennedy's view that the future promise of any nation can be directly measured by the current prospects of its youth. May God continue to bless the great people of Englishdam, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the Honorable Chair, the Chair now recognizes the Honorable Member for Marathon.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the Admiral residents of the exceptional constituency of Marathon, who bestowed me the honor of representing them in the 17th session of Youth Parliament. Mr. Speaker, allow me to paint a picture for you. Mothers cannot provide for their children, homes are being lost to foreclosure, unable to pay the electricity bill, and unfit to see the physician due to lack of finances. These are only some of the harsh realities Bahamian people face due to unemployment. Employment is a necessary part of society because it provides individuals with income and social responsibility. The demographic ages 15 to 24, as stated in the resolution, primarily includes persons who are recent graduates of high school. It is a sad actuality that persons spend 12 years in school working hard to receive an education but cannot put the skills and information they have learned into the workforce because they are unable to find employment. Mr. Speaker, finding the cure for unemployment should be the top priority on any government's agenda. The staggering rate of unemployment, which stands at about 22% in the Bahamas, according to the International Development Bank, affects our beautiful chains of islands negatively. Firstly, a high unemployment rate means that the government has to allocate more funds to ensure that persons who are unemployed have the necessities for daily living. These statistics allow for the number of government-granted financial assistance to increase, such as allowance for grocery items or housing. Secondly, as stated earlier, the increase of unemployment has a correlation with the increase of crime. Many crimes here in the Bahamas are committed by individuals who are unemployed. The lack of finances or labor result in some members of the demographic funding illegal ways to gain income, such as the selling of illegal narcotics or burglary. Mr. Speaker, I have only touched lightly the detrimental effects of unemployment, but the solution to the problem is far from easy. I believe the first step in lowering the unemployment rate is to tackle the economic issue of the country first. There needs to be more investment opportunities for Bahamian and foreign investors, and we must diversify our economy by exploring new industries and not only relying on tourism and banking. Mr. Speaker, we need to invest in more job starter programs, such as the Labor on the Block initiative, organized by the Department of Labor, which is a government program that connects employers to persons seeking employment. Investments in the programs like this will result in the initiative reaching more individuals, such as persons in the Family Islands. Mr. Speaker, taxes are a necessary component for a government to gain revenue, but these taxes can become a burden upon some businesses. Also, the bills that are associated with running a business, such as electricity or water bills, remain high. Mr. Speaker, the education of our youth is a crucial component to the lowering of the unemployment rate. We must ensure that each and every Bahamian youth is educated with the best curriculum and resources so that employers both locally and abroad receive the best of the best. Mr. Speaker, it hurts my heart to know that in this country, persons travel abroad to study at the university level for about 4 years, some spending more than $30,000 on their education. But when they return home to the Bahamas and is in search for a job, they are struck with the phrase that they are overqualified. As I stated earlier, we must diversify our economy so we do not waste the precious talent and gifts hidden here in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, unemployment has a major social and economic role in the progression of our country. And if we do not find a solution to unemployment now, we will continue to support the wall that holds up the future to economic disaster. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Fox Hill.
Firstly, thank God for this opportunity to represent the resilient constituents of Fox Hill.
and to thank my constituents for allowing me to represent them in this honorable house. Nearly every country in the world grapples with the challenge of youth unemployment. But it hits hard low-income countries like the Bahamas. In May of 2017, the IDB reported that unemployment rate among young persons in the Bahamas peaked as high as 30%, Mr. Speaker. Concerns rise around the world about the jobs that are available. But in actuality, the real concern is jobs that aren't available, Mr. Speaker. There seems to be a growing number of jobs in both the private and public sector. But the jobs that are available are all occupied by senior level positions and not extended to youth of our nation. Consequently, a vast number of young adults are discouraged in the market and seek employment elsewhere. A report released by the Tribune on October 27, 2014 stated that almost two-thirds of our tertiary educated Bahamians have migrated abroad seeking jobs in developed countries, costing our nation about 4.4% of our GDP. In a national address on the 24th of May 2017, Her Excellency Dame Margaret Penlin reaffirmed this notion when she stated, "No country can maximize its potential if many of its talented young people enlist their talents permanently in developed countries elsewhere. In order for a country to harness its full potential, we must give our youth a chance to gain work experience." Chronic youth unemployment puts the brakes on national economies, Mr. Speaker, and the lack of a literate and skilled young workforce limits businesses' ability to generate growth, greater profits, and create new jobs. Unemployment has a significant effect on violent crimes and a sizable effect on financially motivated crimes. The impact of joblessness on overall crime constitutes almost 1/4 of the crime gap between 19 to 24-year-olds and individuals aged 29 to 34. This result suggests that unemployment may explain a meaningful proportion as to why male youths account for the disproportionate share of total crime. It is essential to equip students with marketable skills to improve their transition into the labor market. Governments should invest in embedding technology into our educational concepts to enable interactive learning environment. While the Citizen Security and Justice Program is geared toward educating youth that are at risk, this program falls under the case of, Mr. Speaker, too little, too late. Mr. Speaker, this program should be implemented in the junior schools, whereas the students that are at risk can be equipped with the soft and hard skills, Mr. Speaker. Like the Bible says, train up a child in the way he should go, not teach a child when he is old. Because I can assure you one thing, Mr. Speaker, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I cannot take my seat without stating that to combat or lower the percentage of youth unemployment, we must embrace technology. Technology means much more than just equipping our classrooms with computers or providing internet access. Investing over $8 million in computers and put them in classrooms doesn't solve the issue. I suggest that a proportion of that $8 million goes toward introducing courses that will teach our students how to build and create applications, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we must educate our youth about policies surrounding cryptocurrencies, engage them in learning about Forex, and teach them about the digital economy, Mr. Speaker, as this will help our youth to transcend our economy into the digital market.
Fox Hill, please take your seat.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Seabreeze.
Mr. Speaker, first, let me thank God for allowing me here, my time and space here today. To the great constituency of Seabreeze, I thank you for allowing me to converse your concerns, but mostly the youth of this nation. I doubt that my members here assembled in the House today denied the urgency of getting young people into jobs. A lost generation is in the making, Mr. Speaker, which could scar the Bahamas for decades to come. I truly describe youth unemployment as a ticking time bomb for not only the economy, but for the society also. Our task here today is a great and very concerning one, concerning unemployment in young persons earning and learning and training them for the long run ahead. However, we look at the situation that is there. In the Bahamas, unemployment has remained considerably higher than any other age group, being that of 25% in November of 2016 and remained as high as 24% in August 2017. Young people fare far worse. Older people stare down. We can debate why this case, but for the young people that affect is mostly academic debated. That is, the professional catastrophic and immediate source, not only of low income, but of low confidence, poor health, damaged relationship, and often extreme social marginalization, all in which further harms jobs perspective and adds to the cost of putting it all in the right perspective. I doubt that the honorable members will dispute any of this and the question here today, as I highlight three main priorities. First, young people need more jobs opportunities to be available to them now more than ever. Secondly, young people now need better preparation and motivation to work, Mr. Speaker. There needs to be a new vision that calls and not forgetting the half of young people who are not destined for university or for a high apprenticeship quality post. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, unemployment among young people needs to be supported for a far more active welfare state to help them get into work and to stay there, Mr. Speaker. Gone are the days where we look to New Providence, Grand Bahama, Abaco, and Bimini for being at the forefront of generating jobs, Mr. Speaker. The time has come now for us to look at developing the Old Islands, everyone in Grand Bahama, from Grand Bahama in the north, Mr. Speaker, to Inagua in the south. We have bright minds, Mr. Speaker, that leave our family islands in search of high education standard and joy to enjoy a better way of life. Let me take these three priorities in turn. First, more jobs are almost every accepted as a strong initiative, are indeed employed and reactive for more unemployed young people. The present government has put forward the scrapings from a previous government, further job fund, now organize and reconsider the need to do more. Hence, the government borrowed $20 million to fund the Citizen Security and Justice Program. I strongly support the Citizen Security and Justice Program, provided that the young people are treated properly, and I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we need to go further than beyond the youth programs. Hence, I propose real jobs guarantee from the ages of 25 and lower. The second priority, Mr. Speaker, the youth are the better works of our nation. Schools and further education colleges have a big job to do in representing this. Even with the rise in school standards over the recent years, 4 out of 10 16-year-olds are not getting 5 BGCSE, including math and English, which all important of terms of their employability. It is recorded that a recent report on a vocational education contains a startling fact that in 4 in 10 16-year-olds, we do not have 5 good BJC, including math and English. Only 4%, Mr. Speaker, I repeat, only 4% attain BGCSE in English and math in any vocational institute. English and math should be essential building blocks in whether courses are taken by post-16-year-old with the basic skills. Urgent reform is needed there. The educational system needs to promote technical discipline far better. The academic years from 14 to 19-year-old, Mr. Speaker, each with a technical specialism in engineering and construction, to digital media, each sponsor the majority jointing companies and universities. Unless good quality apprenticeship programs for under 21 years leading to good quality jobs, Mr. Speaker, becomes far more numerous, where we have pathways of unemployment in youth teens. We also need a better work experience for teen whilst at school and a systematic mentoring of the youth by youth people themselves, including those in work and mentoring and those who are on their way into it. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, on the welfare itself, the minister is a respect champion of active welfare.
Seabreeze, your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Central Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand here with great pride as I represent my fellow constituents of Central Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, July 9, 2015, a Tribune headline read, 11,000 youth jobless in New Providence. The article went on to state that 13% of those young people had given up on searching for gainful employment and now contribute to our growing crime rates. By November 2017, the Bahamas had reached an alarming rate of 22% unemployment among its youth. The bottom line is, young people who want work cannot find work. This is a problem. The worldwide economic crisis that began in 2008 crossed borders and rode up on our shores. Mr. Speaker, we were not exempt. In the same way, every issue in this nation touches another. It's like a ripple effect. The levels of joblessness amongst 15 to 24-year-olds is urgent and growing. Every summer, thousands of 16 and 18-year-olds march out of high school straight on to the unemployment line. It doesn't stop there. Along comes the waves of consequences. Mr. Speaker, studies show that unemployment among our youth is linked to increased incidences of depression and stress. Lack of unemployment for the nation's youth can also result in reduced future economic opportunities. Some of those released from school with no means to further their education are left to enter into the markets where they must compete with older workers experienced in a society where employers no longer want to train from the ground up anymore. As a result, many of these job seekers become entangled in a system which passes them over for the next round of talent. The ripples don't stop there. As in their nature, they only grow wider and wider. We need to come to grips with reality and realize that we are an aging nation that will eventually need taken care of by young Bahamians with no income. Mr. Speaker, no income equals no NIB contribution and an even greater strain on our public pocket. Can you hear me now? The need for action is great. The need for action is now. We must improve employment opportunities for our youth. Mr. Speaker, we need to strengthen partnership with the private sector to support businesses to assist in creating job opportunities for our young people. We need to discover brain drain. We need to discourage brain drain by creating incentives for specialty skilled Bahamians, college graduates, to start their own business with maybe tax waivers for their first years of their business with an agreement to apprenticeship programs to employ and train significant amount of Bahamians between the age of 15 to 25. Mr. Speaker, we need to develop entrepreneurship modules as a part of family life in high schools that teaches students to begin to discover and develop their natural gifts. We need to strengthen and enforce the country's retirement policies to ensure that employees due for retirement are processed in a timely manner. We need to reduce the retirement age by a few years, which will increase the availability of jobs across all sectors. Young Bahamians are the future of this nation, and its sustainability lies on the backs of all of us. The responsibility does not only lie with the government and employers of this country, but it lies with we as young people. Mr. Speaker, we need to develop skills that interest us and apply ourselves diligently to our studies. This will secure for us a great chance of creating ripples in society that increase our economic status and, by extension, benefit the economy of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the honourable member for South and Central Andros.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I want to first of all thank God for this opportunity. It is my extreme pleasure to stand here to represent the great constituency of Central and South Andros in debating the topic, youth and unemployment. Mr. Speaker, according to Ms. Krishna Roll, Deputy Chief Reporter of the Tribune, a day after the current Minister of Education said, something is wrong with the country's educational system, officials withheld an official subject letter grade breakdown for the Bahamas General Certificate of Secondary Education, which also shows that of 6,692 students who sat the national exam this year, only passed 521, or 7.8%, scored a C or above, with mathematics, English language, and a science subject. He continued, there is no way to camouflage it. There is no way to excuse it. Something is wrong and we must fix it. Mr. Speaker, there is a national problem we need to urgently address, a problem that can disable and dismantle the sustainable growth and development of our great nation. This problem is youth and unemployment. It is critical then we consider a fundamental question to better understand this national problem. What is the cause for unemployment? Mr. Speaker, consider this. Many of our high school students have difficulty with basic math. Many have challenges drafting a letter, writing an essay, and filling out an application form. In a modernized era with the technological advancement at our fingertips, the above-mentioned issues should not be a challenge for our nation's future leaders. As highlighted in the minister's address, there is no way to camouflage it. There is no way to excuse it. Something is wrong and we must fix it. Mr. Speaker, let us recognize and admit that the root of this national problem begins and is perpetrated from that of primary, secondary, and high school learning and development institutions. The numbers cannot lie. They will speak the truth, the whole truth, so God help us. As highlighted in the statistics earlier, we can examine and conclude that the results from national examinations such as the BGCSE speaks volumes as to what product we are developing for our workforce and organizations for the future. Today's multinational enterprises, firms, and international organizations demand the best we have to offer. How can we compete globally when too many of our students are failing national exams? This inability to compute, read, and write successfully will no doubt increase our employment rate and predicaments. Mr. Speaker, the highlighted statistics suggest that there must be a problem with our existing educational system. Why are students failing, you may ask? Well, will our students, our future leaders, be ready to lead this great nation in a tomorrow of positive change and growth? Mr. Speaker, as a future teacher of the Bahamas, I believe another major issue contributing to this educational and unemployment crisis is the lack of motivation and morale with many of our teachers. This lack of enthusiasm leads to poor lessons, poor classroom lectures, poor after-school care, and last but not least, poorly produced students. In order for efficient learning to take place, the learning environment should be enjoyable. It is a known fact that the teacher that inspires the whole child will get the best results. When I say inspire, what do I mean? You not only teach the subject matter, but you ensure that the child understands in order for learning connection to take place. Teachers must constantly speak positive messages and give the learners hope to change and get better. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Education's vision statement states, and I quote, "Our vision is of a Bahamian education system that will foster academic excellence and equip..." Thank you.
Thank you. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to address this opportunity as a privilege to bring the opinions of the people of Centerville to the forefront of change. I am not only here to shed light on such a critical topic, but to comfort the woes of my unemployed young Centerville people. Normally at the age of 16, young people are expected to leave the days of high school behind and enter the workforce to pursue a job which supports their livelihood. However, stated in the resolution, it stands that even in August of 2017, the youth unemployment rate remained at a startling 24%. So, Mr. Speaker, if we as a people are allowing teenagers to compete on a global stage with leaving certificates and no knowledge of completing job applications, yet wish to see change in this nation, then we are definitely in for a shocking surprise. These high school students are oblivious of the unfamiliar struggles that await them in the real world. As a result, the unemployed youth is left with loads of free time. Free time to attempt robbing local businesses and innocent civilians. Free time to hold commitments to gang leaders, and free time to sell or even use narcotics. This should not be the case, Mr. Speaker, but this is the sad reality of our Bahamian people. So being a part of the generation that is responsible for a change, what can we as the noble members of Youth Parliament do to combat such a pressing concern? Allow me to present you with a prominent issue that our young people face today. A young individual walks into a business establishment seeking employment. However, when he is handed the application, the frustration and confusion he experiences is mind-boggling. On the other hand, not being able to complete this form does not change the fact that rent still has to be paid, his children still need to eat, his mother needs groceries in her home, and most importantly, this young man has not eaten in days. So, Mr. Speaker, in the words of a Bahamian, when pressure tall, pressure tall. Therefore, this character proceeds to rob an innocent civilian of her hard-earned money. During the high school days of this young person, both he and his parents were not interested in his attendance of school or his attitude gauged toward learning. However, Mr. Speaker, I believe that in reforming the teaching styles of educators, we can bring light to the Bahamian curriculum. Enthusiasm needs to be brought into the classroom so that students have a burning desire to attend school and learn. We need teachers who will help children to forget about the issues that they face at home, someone caring and dedicated to steer that child onto the right path. Not every child will grasp the information taught in the same way, but it is my belief that if we were to embrace different learning styles, then no child would be left behind. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I stand firmly saying that the most powerful weapon we can use as a people to change this land is education. As the youth of the Bahamas, we must use the resources around us that can help to decrease this youth unemployment rate and increase economic growth. Use the family trades that you were taught to take advantage of the organizations around us that are willing to support your ideas financially. For example, Startup Bahamas and various entrepreneurship programs offered by the government to assist small businesses. According to Bahamas Information Services, in February 2018, the Cabinet of the Bahamas had approved the launch of the Small Business Development Center of the Bahamas. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that this nation wants to see the government bring forth some kind of economic growth, but this growth does not start with the government. It begins with you and I as the youth. Conclusively, we need to reform the educational system for the diverse generations that are quickly approaching.
Furthermore, teach the youth the skills to manage their own businesses so we may be one step forward toward creating a more independent generation. Mr. Speaker, without entrepreneurship and education, I do not see how this nation can bring forth an employed and efficient youth. I so move, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Before the continuance of our proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge that it is contrary to parliamentary procedure to speak without a coat. That being said, I'd like to apologize on behalf of the chair for the incorrect vestment of the member for South and Central Andros. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Long Island.
Mr. Speaker, a pleasant good morning. I rise in this most august and honorable assembly on behalf of representing the great constituency of Long Island. Mr. Speaker, the youth of a nation are the trustees of posterity. We cannot resign ourselves to losing a generation of young people who do not have the resources to work. A generation without work, Mr. Speaker, is a future defeat for our great country and for humanity itself. As long as we remain vigilant at building our internal abundance, an abundance of integrity, forgiveness, and service, then external lack is bound to be temporary. We have a powerful potential in our youth, Mr. Speaker, and we must have the courage to change all ideas and practices so that we may direct their future to good ends. Potential is being wasted, Mr. Speaker. Bright minds becoming discouraged, PhDs, doctorates, masters collecting dust on shelves with no use because of the lack of job supply. According to the annual GDP report in 2017, the Bahamas recorded a government debt equivalent to 67% of the country's gross domestic product in 2017. And the country's national debt continues to climb, showing that it now stands at more than $7.2 billion. With our nation's debt at an all-time high, Mr. Speaker, this youth unemployment only adds to it. Not only does it add to the debt, but crime rates also. Psychological studies on crime by Richard Rosenfeld shows that with a lack of job leading to lack of interest among young people, this will result in crime. Unemployment itself is a serious issue for Bahamians, but also it results in even more problems for the government to face. I am urging this government to work with all the local banks to make it easier for business owners to receive funding so that they can launch their new businesses or expand pre-existing businesses. As Bahamians, we all know too well that banks today are very tight with money, and it discourages our young entrepreneurs. There is also a need to remove a lot of this red tape surrounding the process for getting a business license in order to make this process easier instead of frustrating our young entrepreneurs. Mr. Speaker, if you will allow me to permit to address a statement made by the Honorable Member of Central and South Abaco pertaining the implementation of hotels and family islands. Mr. Speaker, are our young people not more than this? As a country, we need to stop training people to work in hospitality and train them on how to start companies. For example, at the National Training Agency and the Leadership Development Institute, they train people, yes, how to get a job, not to become a business owner who provides the jobs. We need to move from that worker and service mentality and move into an employer and owner mentality, empowering our youth to know that it is just more than working at Atlantis and hospitality. Another solution can be creating pathways to success for out-of-school and out-of-work youth by overhauling our school dropout prevention policies. Amongst youth, full-time, full-year workers, high school dropouts earn about 25% less than their peers a school diploma. Specific proposals for dropout prevention are to initiate a competitive grants program to school districts and nonprofit organizations for comprehensive with wraparound service designed to increase the high school graduation rate in high poverty schools and to enable school students who have left high school to return to obtain their diploma. Aside from reforming education, tackling youth unemployment will also take commitment to funding research, educational programs, and employment programs. In order to finance these programs, Funding for education needs to increase and be wisely spent. More investment needs to happen in our country. There are not enough jobs to keep up with the amount of unemployed youth with the 5,000 at minimum high school graduates each year. Notably, I commend the Minister of Education for everything he has done and continues to do and his improvements to the education sector of the Bahamas. But, Bahamians, there is always room for even more improvement. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, youth unemployment is a global problem, and many have tried to conquer this with their own powers but failed. Irrespective of the fact that some have failed in their efforts to provide working solutions for youth unemployment, new practical solutions should not be jettisoned. I leave you with these words, Mr. Speaker. A new generation is amongst this country who are the forefront of change. And Mr. Speaker, the future of this youth is now, not later. And if we do not act, this potential will slip away.
As many, the chair recognizes the honourable member for Garden Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. The secret to change is to focus all of your energy, not fighting the old, but building on the new. To be afforded this opportunity to represent not only my constituency, but the community I was raised in, is certainly a blessing. And Mr. Speaker, I count it joy. Mr. Speaker, we the constituents of Garden Hills are in full support of this resolution. Youth are an investment. They are the future. How we view them and treat them in most cases determine the outcome of our society. Knowing what to do, Mr. Speaker, is not enough, as policies directed at young people often fail. Why? For three main reasons. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, the transitioning phases of youth requires a coherent approach to establish clear lines of accountability for their future. Due to the fact that this concern is a multifaceted and multi-sectorial issue, it is vitally important for a collaboration of various government sectors to become in sync, so that the national youth policy is in line with the overall national development policy. Case in point, I have heard about parking boys and girls who are made to work 40 hours without compensation, Mr. Speaker, something the Department of Labor has to look into. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, young people often lack voice in their design and implementation of policies that often affect them. Governments at all levels need to be more open to listening to young people, particularly older youth beginning to engage in more formally as citizens. Although the interests of young people may be reflected by older groups, young persons are not involved in decision-making at the local and national level. I pose to you this question. For us here in the Bahamas, what have we done in consulting the young people in this regards in areas like Bain and Grantstown, Englishdam, or any of our family islands? Finally, Mr. Speaker, education or the lack thereof. Education is the fundamental tool for improving the lives of others, leaving your community and the world better than you found it. The roots of education are bitter, Mr. Speaker, but the fruit is sweet. There are few success stories, few policies and programs that are proven effective. Too many policies directed at young people, including many discussed by politicians, are promising but unproven, and this is a serious impediment to the wider replication. I think the time has come, Mr. Speaker, for young people to be consulted in regards to education in preparation for their unemployment. For example, why not access the students to determine their gifts and abilities and steer them in that direction, rather than forcing them to learn things that will not benefit them in their employment journey? The IMF statement, in my mind, sums up the chat I have with unemployed individuals and young people in general. Young people will tell you such things as, you graduate from high school or college just to play the block, because it isn't what you know, but rather who you know, Mr. Speaker. For the most part, young people just want a fair chance, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, policies should be created to ensure that adequate and progressive steps must be taken to mitigate and reverse the effects of youth employment in all sectors by, number one, targeting youth for vacation and social programs that increases the possibility that they will gain legal earnings and obtain respect through non-violent means, while concurrently reducing the youth employment. Number two, improve policing and a more effective criminal justice system that should improve deterrence. Number 3, the limited public resources should be targeted towards the high crime areas and the most vulnerable. Number 4, initiatives should be subject to rigorous evaluation, which require better data collection, monitoring, and sharing among all government sectors with the necessary funding support as needed. Number 5, utilize the private sector to assist with the training for the youth. And number 6, fund urban renewal programs. Mr. Speaker, honorable mention goes to brain drain as it relates to unemployment among our young people. This process has seen the Bahamas lose some of its most educated and talented workers to other countries, simply through migration, simply because they are told they are overqualified, or if they aren't overqualified, they lack experience, which leaves them jobless in their own country, Mr. Speaker. Their departure causes the Bahamas to suffer economic hardships because those who remain don't have the know-how to make a difference in certain areas, Mr. Speaker. I can relate because I have family members and friends who have taken the step back to seek better economic and conditions for themselves. In fact, for me, I have even doubted with the idea. However, for me, there's no place like home, and I want to be able to get back to my country all that I can, because this still is the best place in the world to live. Nowhere can compare, Mr. Speaker. To mitigate these brain issues, policies should include the following, Mr. Speaker. Remove the restraints, links, and experience from the hiring practices, Mr. Speaker. Higher wage offerings, Mr. Speaker. Better benefits. Enforcement of Bahamian first for employment, Mr. Speaker. And on-the-job training opportunities, Mr. Speaker. In closing, Mr. Speaker, to increase the chance of success, policymakers must start at an articulate and a coherent view of desired outcomes for young people, integrating that view with the national planning and implementing mechanisms. The agency responsible for making sure that youth outcomes are part of sector policy needs to have a strong capacity, as do the sector ministries and other agencies, through suitable mainstreaming mechanisms, adequate budget allocations, and technical training. The power of youth is the commonwealth for the entire world, as quoted by Kailash Satyarthi. Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and may God continue to bless the entire commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Inconsolable, tragic, dreadful, terrifying, and painful. These are the words used to describe a family's agony when waking up out of their sleep to view a relative's lifeless body across the street. Breaking news this evening, we are live in Fox Hill, where a 22-year-old young man was gunned down near his home. More bloodshed over the weekend, 4 murdered, including a young man. Young child shot dead in home in the brazen daylight. Double shooting in Bain and Grantstown that claimed the life of one man and injured the next, just this week. These are the highlights, printed in bold on the front page of local newspapers, and will forever remain in the annals of history and in the minds of impacted citizens. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise on behalf of the wonderful constituents of East Grand Bahama. I express gratitude to them for this opportunity, and I vow to uphold to the decorum of this House. Mr. Speaker, the above statements leads me into my discussion on youth unemployment. According to the Nassau Guardian, youth unemployment remained high, increasing from 22.1% in November 2017 to 24.1% in May. I must mention at the onset that unemployment has a connection to crime. This is therefore the main reason for the gangs and the crime throughout the Bahamas. They are turning to the quick money, which leads to the high crime, drug dependency, broken families, and early death or death of innocent bystanders. Unless we change our approach fundamentally, the situation will not change. Here's what I believe. Children must be motivated, especially by parents and teachers. This means understanding that every child has a purpose and is of value and can be the change. Thousands of students graduate every year. Those who attend college abroad don't want to come back because of the lack of opportunity. And perhaps what is most concerning is that discouraged workers have increased across the board and are becoming pessimistic about the prospects of finding work. Mr. Speaker, it should be the school counselor's duty to make sure as many students in high school fill out the college or university or trade school applications, whether local or international. I share and I echo similar sentiments to the member of Pine Ridge. Mr. Speaker, how many persons from the 52-week program are employed in the end? Where are the records that show that this program is increasing the overall employment rate? All 12th grade high school students should be linked to some type of company and job training to allow students to gain the exposure necessary for the workforce and perhaps be taken on permanently. Mr. Speaker, I also believe that the already existent National Training Agency should be expanded and improved upon to a state-of-the-art center for all youth to garner the soft skills necessary for the workforce. Mr. Speaker, it is of the utmost importance that we address the issue of unemployment heads on. It will take both public and private sector partnerships to tackle this growing epidemic. Will it be easy? No. Worth it? Absolutely. We must invest in our youth because they are not our future, Mr. Speaker. They are not our future, Mr. Speaker. They are our leaders today. How do I know this, Mr. Speaker? Because they are at the forefront of change. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Central and South Eleuthera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A future where the thought of having a job is almost uncommon. A future where we must scavenge for food and necessities just to sustain us. A future where there's no hope for change and a society that is frowned upon by many. This is the vision of what we have to look forward to if the issue of youth unemployment is not eradicated. If we desire to become a prosperous nation, a nation of youth with the power to break barriers, we must see change. Mr. Speaker, fellow members of Parliament, and the Bahamas at large, I rise before you at the forefront of change with no other machination than to voice my views on such a detrimental issue. It is an honor to represent the great constituents of the one and only Central and South Eleuthera and address the youth unemployment in our nation. In the Bahamas, youth unemployment rates are high and have been increasing for over 10 years, from 15% in 2001 to 30.8% in 2014 for 15 to 24-year-olds. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas has the second highest rate of unemployment in the Caribbean. According to a report from the Inter-American Development Bank, in New Providence specifically, 10,605 youth between 15 to 29 years old are either unemployed or discouraged. In addition to that, based on that percentage, some 1,379 young adults in Nassau and elsewhere in New Providence have given up seeking work. Mr. Speaker, as I go into depth and speak for South and Central Eleuthera, youth unemployment has immensely affected such a small-scale island. The deficiency of jobs in Central and South Eleuthera has led to a brain drain. As the Member of Parliament for Central and South Abaco stated, family islands are forced to leave the island. Many Eleutherans leave the island to seek better opportunities in New Providence and even the United States. We have been losing our youth to this issue for decades upon decades. In addition to that, in most cases, the youth do not return to the family islands due to the state that it is in. We cannot blame the youth for this because, let's be factual, there are so little jobs there, it would be a waste of time and a waste of qualification to return. With that being said, although I wish to not speak so deeply on this issue, I cannot avoid the Disney discussion that has been so prominent in the news. This situation in South Eleuthera should also be looked at from the perspective of the youth. According to the IDB, the country also faces high rates of long-term unemployment, where 50% of youth remain unemployed for more than a year. When an individual is starving, food hasn't touched their lips in such a long time. No matter what they are given, they will hungrily take it, only because they have no other choice. Mr. Speaker, seeing that there are no other options, when a job opportunity such as Disney presents itself, they will mindlessly support it without looking at all the sides of the proposal, regardless of whether it is beneficial or detrimental to the island. The negatives will be swept under the rug simply because it is an opportunity to gain a living. Even more so, how can we be so swift to lunge at this sudden promise of a job? Like most businesses, Disney may require skills in order to be given a job. Before we assume that we have a sure win, most adolescents do not even have the adequate skill bank to become first preference for hire. According to the findings from a 2012 survey of 505 Bahamian businesses, the IDB report said, employers report the lack of specific skills as the most important barrier to recruit workers, 34%, by applicants' lack of experience and applicants' lack of soft skills. Mr. Speaker, there are many that conclude that the increase in unemployment was exacerbated by the absence of job-specific and technical skills among potential employees. Some may say this is the adolescent's responsibility. However, not every school provides those technical skills that prepares the individual. A select few schools provide electrical installation, auto mechanics, office procedures, and so many other classes that are needed to qualify an individual as job ready. So yes, it is the youth's responsibility to assure that we are qualified, but in order to qualify, we need the tools, we need the classes, we need the teachers, we need more opportunities. Get a good education, they said. Do your work, they said. Learn all you can, they said. So you can get a good job, they said. 3 of these 4, most adolescents have completed. The last step has yet to be done for some. We could take the initiative and invest in independent learning of those skills. However, that should not be the case. We should be provided with those necessities. Mr. Speaker, that portion is out of the youth's control. As my fellow MP for Acklands also quoted, we cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. Franklin D. Roosevelt. The youth of Central and South Eleuthera need to be built up. Why not provide them with an institution to gain that skillful knowledge? Implement a BTVI satellite campus to offer them even more skills and qualifications to gain more job opportunities. Allow these individuals better and free classes. Not only does this provide them with a tool belt of skills, it reduces the amount of family islanders leaving to seek further education in New Providence. This way, we can ensure that we can keep our youth and help to improve our island. In closing, Mr. Speaker, although youth unemployment is a heavy burden, we can combat this. More jobs should be provided to our youth, the education system should be expanded, and more opportunities should be present for not only New Providence, but the family islands in particular. Mr. Speaker, I will finally say, in the words of Abdallah Lee, the incentive that you give to your youth is going to be the make or break future of our country. Thank you for your time.
As many, the Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I stand in these hallowed halls today with the greatest honor, I speak on behalf of the illustrious people of Carmichael. I speak with grace, pride, and dignity. Mr. Speaker, in the words of Robert Half, hard work without a talent is a shame, but talent without hard work is a tragedy. It is indeed tragic, or should I say diabolical, that many of our Bahamian youth are unemployed, which is a matter that can, should, and will be resolved. Mr. Speaker,
I stand in this honorable house today in distress as I begin to reflect on the issues of unemployment faced by our Bahamian youth. Mr. Speaker, I believe that it is imperative that we highlight the necessary issues that affect youth and unemployment. Mr. Speaker, as I commence my resolutions, I will take a minute to highlight the root causes for why such policies should be debated, which is simply the high rate of unemployment in our youth today, which ranges from ages 15 to 24. Contributing factors are the lack of proper qualifications, education, and training. Mr. Speaker, there are also social facets that are negatively affecting the youth, such as gangs, teenage pregnancy, bullying, and peer pressure, just to name a few. Mr. Speaker, as I stand in disgust, I come with solutions essential to the improvement of this current issue. First and foremost, Mr. Speaker, the methods of testing we currently have in place are not in the same playing field as international countries. For example, it is required for Bahamian students to sit the BGCSE examinations. However, for the most part, many colleges abroad do not recognize these test scores. The majority of colleges abroad require the SAT, which is the most common international examination, the ACT, the GMAT, and the list goes on. Mr. Speaker, we tend to spend so much time focusing on our local examinations that we are not focused on international tests that give our students an opportunity to pursue higher education abroad. Furthermore, this is why I believe that we should begin to focus on more standardized tests and that are recognized worldwide. Mr. Speaker, this will allow persons to be well prepared and equipped for opportunities on the horizon. We will also be on par academically with international students. Apart from this, Mr. Speaker, we need to diversify job fairs and encourage more of the non-traditional careers, such as forensic scientists, X-ray specialists, healthcare technicians, and audiologists, just to name a few. We also need to have more workshops that provide training to enhance better work ethic and work readiness upon graduation. I believe that a more diverse country is a wealthier country. Mr. Speaker, we heard the same stories over and over where our very own travel abroad and work to obtain multiple certificates and degrees, excited to return home with the goal of giving back to their country, only to find out that they are considered overqualified for the jobs that they apply for. Mr. Speaker, what does overqualified really mean? Are we now ignorant to what true excellence really is? Why do we not use these qualifications to build up our country in a positive way? Mr. Speaker, this is why our young people leave the country and go elsewhere, building up other countries, adding to our brain drain. Mr. Speaker, why are we settling for mediocrity? Why are we selling ourselves short when we have such talented young minds here in our very own country? Last but not least, Mr. Speaker, I believe that policies should be implemented to ensure succession planning and mentorship by senior persons in various disciplines. I believe that it is a disservice to our youth and by extension our country that this knowledge acquired is not passed on. The knowledge disseminated through succession planning will benefit commerce and industry in our country. Others will be better equipped to carry on the work of persons in those positions after they have either retired or passed on. Mr. Speaker, after adopting these solutions mentioned here today, we will be better equipped, better educated, more qualified, and more confident to face these challenges that lie ahead. As I close, Mr. Speaker, I'll end by saying that we are the future of this great nation. We are the ones set to carry on the baton from our forefathers as we represent the youth of our constituencies. Mr. Speaker, I believe that we, as the youth of this country, should continue to be agents of change as we press on to build up the great Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I so move, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Vinnie, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the support from the constituents of Golden Gate for allowing me this opportunity to represent on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, youth unemployment, like any form of unemployment, is an economic issue. And the economy can only grow by investing in initiatives that will increase future productivity. These are when educated and entrepreneurial thinking, youth is a productive, when we invest in these initiatives, we have a productive economy. Serious changes in our traditional thinking patterns when addressing a matter as serious as the astronomical rate of unemployment will be undergirded. Mark Twain said it best when he said that the only person who likes change is a wet baby. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, allow me to present this wet baby to you. One problem, three solutions. Mr. Speaker, I would like to propose and briefly discuss the implementation of, firstly, the I-Study program. Secondly, the National Aptitude for Vocational and Academic Assessment. And thirdly, some increased infrastructure for entrepreneurial incentives and programs. The research has suggested, Mr. Speaker, that the implementation of these three initiatives in conjunction with the current CSJP program will lead to more skilled and knowledgeable high school students, higher graduation rates, reduced youth involvement in underground economies, provide statistical data for better progress tracking and career placement, increase competitiveness and educational awareness, a boom in creativity and entrepreneurship, and an overall reduction in youth unemployment. And before I go further, Mr. Speaker, I beg your mercy as I begin to present this, because I may not get this opportunity again to present in front of distinguished people. According to the economichelp.org, Tej van Pettinger, an economics lecturer in Oxford, compared UK's unemployment rates with the other rates of different categories and ages. In the years 1997 to 2017, it revealed what we're discussing here today, and that is, since the global economic recession, youth unemployment rose faster and stayed considerably higher longer than any other age group. Pettinger cited 9 reasons for this statistic, 4 of them being lack of qualifications, real wage unemployment, cultural and social factors, and underground economies. Students lack qualifications because they fail to pass exams. Students fail to pass exams because they do not understand the material. They do not understand the material, Mr. Speaker, because they do not study. And they do not study because they do not know how to, want to, or their living conditions are just not conducive for success. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, the I-Study program will be an initiative that focuses on students' abilities to manage these variables, meaning that this program's sole responsibility is to provide a positive, relaxed environment away from negative neighborhood and household influences, to focus solely on developing their future. Every community library will be transformed into a modernized study and research hub where peer-to-peer, student-teacher, and specialized tutoring will be provided, as well as homework assistance. This will be accessible to high school students on an evening and weekend basis, fitted with technological capabilities that allow a teacher to better provide aid on demand. Textbooks for every course taught in junior and senior high school levels will be provided as a part of this initiative, along with basic materials. Bus transportation from the hub
and a light refreshment will also be provided. Additionally, the first steps to bettering educational quality will be charged to counselors and family life instructors as they focus on identifying learning preferences and techniques for every student. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I would like to introduce the NAVIS assessment, which stands for the National Aptitude for Vocational and Academic Skills Assessment. This assessment, Mr. Speaker, will allow individuals to focus on strengths while working towards educational foundational goals at their own pace. According to Amanda Morin, an early intervention specialist in the United States, schools should use aptitude tests to measure abilities, talents, and reasoning and artistic abilities in order to help round a child's profile. Mr. Speaker, in 2016, the Nassau Guardian quoted the former Minister of Education, Jerome Fitzgerald, who stated that only 50% of public school students graduate from high school with the knowledge, tools, and needed to properly transition from high school. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, for 20 years, we don't seem to understand that you cannot lump the two different types of students in the same category. And the NAVIS assessment is an initiative that separates the two at their own pace and combine them with the same standard educational foundation. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to provide a suggestion to a current initiative for entrepreneurs with the small and medium-sized enterprises. Mr. Speaker, I propose that with youth and young entrepreneurs who qualify for approvals from this particular initiative be granted tax exemption statuses for whatever entrepreneurship opportunity they wish to forego. And as I close, Mr. Speaker, I would like to state that the government have made many fine contributions in areas of education, entrepreneurship over the years. What I propose is not just another program for the government to spend, but it is an insurance that will safeguard whatever investment or whatever program that has already been in place from current administrations. The iStudy program, the NAVIS assessment, and tax exemption for youth entrepreneurs are responsible and will be responsible for skilled and knowledgeable high school students, higher graduation rates, and a lower unemployment rate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the distinctive onus is mine to speak on behalf of the Fort Charlotte constituency on the issue of youth and unemployment in the Bahamas. Unemployment is a social ill that is taking root around the world, within our region, and of course, in the Bahamas. Here in the Bahamas, statistics reveal that in the month of January of 2018, and perhaps up to this present juncture, unemployment continues to be prevalent among those in our country between the ages of 15 to 24. Must you be ever mindful, Mr. Speaker, that this statistic explicitly states that unemployment among those 15 to 24 continues to be higher than any age group. Now, why is that, Mr. Speaker? I argue that this is predominantly because of the lack of jobs that is available to our youth. Jobs that would enable our youth to work, to create revenue, and to contribute to the success of our economy. Every year, Mr. Speaker, students graduate from academic institutions all over the Bahamas, and a significant number of recent graduates, even those from the Fort Charlotte constituency, hope to obtain and secure employment, but are unable to do so because of the lack of jobs. Consequently, thousands of children and adolescents become unemployed and furthermore become members of this vulnerable group that utilizes other strategies to create a stream of revenue for themselves. It is then as a result of the unavailability of economic opportunities that the people of the Bahamas witnesses a drastic increase in abject poverty and consequentially crime. The resolution on youth and unemployment proposes that in the Caribbean, young people are both perpetrators and victims of crime. We find that in the Bahamas, poverty and crime are geographically concentrated, which means then that one will see the prevalence and the reoccurring of nefarious criminal activities such as robbery, such as drug trafficking, and murder in areas that are pervaded by poverty because of unemployment. This exacerbates the dilemma of youth and unemployment because the government of the Bahamas has to now shift its agenda and focus on means of reducing crime. In doing this, then, the government now has to invest in means of combating crime rather than investing in infrastructure, education, health, and pertinent sectors that would all efficiently decrease the rates of unemployment among youth in the Bahamas. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, our youth, particularly those who are not as academically inclined, are exiting high schools without the basic skills to perform productively on the job. As a result of this, when they seek employment, they get denied. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am fully aware of the unfortunate reasons as to why the rate of unemployment is skyscraping. I am also very aware, and I wish to accentuate the efforts of former and successive governments in the creation of new means of employment and the purchasing of infrastructure to eventually create jobs, as the government remains ever mindful that the creation of jobs assists our Bahamas with the reduction of unemployment, with the generation of revenue, reduction of crime, and other benefits, all of which would subsequently result in an afloat economy in the Bahamas. However, even with the recent creation of jobs, there is still a considerably and unignorable high rate of unemployment among youth in the Bahamas today. And so, Mr. Speaker, as we are at the forefront of change, I declare that it is certainly time for a change. It is time for us to address the issue of unemployment among youth. Let us begin to teach our youth about entrepreneurship, because I believe entrepreneurship is a viable solution to unemployment among youth. We can empower our youth with the requisite skills so that they can become effective leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs of their own businesses. Let us be eager to invest and supply capital for the young people among us who desire to initiate their own businesses but are unable to do so because of the lack of capital. Mr. Speaker, I believe a fiscal policy needs to be put in place that I believe will reduce unemployment among youth and help to increase aggregate demand and fostering economic growth. As a result of higher aggregate demand, the gross domestic product will increase as well as the demand for workers by firms benefiting from aggregate demand and strong economic growth. Another prominent reason as to why youth employment is so high is because employers are not hiring young people, quite frankly, because they're neophytes. They have no working experience. And so I assert then that in promoting paired teams of junior and senior teams, we can certainly tackle unemployment and simultaneously train and equip our youth as they continue to contribute to the labor force. The formation of such teams support the transfer of knowledge and experience that will certainly be beneficial to our youth. And so, Mr. Speaker, I submit to you these strategies in which we can utilize to combat against the scourge of mass employment among our youth. I so move.
As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Killarney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Words cannot express how humbly dignified I am to stand before you as a representative of Killarney, which I would call the pearl of all of our beautiful islands and kids. It is an honor to stand amongst you all to discuss an issue that currently threatens the overall stability of our nation, which is youth unemployment. Mr. Speaker, combating youth unemployment in this country requires seeing it as a hurricane. Like a hurricane, unemployment, especially among our youth, consumes our victims. This is sad statistics originating from the Inter-American Development Bank reported that in May 2017, the unemployment rate was among young people in the Bahamas peaked as high as 30%, with the native estimated population of about 395,000 at the time. This means that about 1 out of every 3 young persons were unemployed last year. This number should be considered extremely unhealthy when compared to neighboring and larger nations such as the United States, which despite its larger size, boasts an unemployment labor force of only 9%. One of these effects have been a gradual increase in the local crime rate. Presently, the Bahamas sadly boasts damaging numbers as the Global Health Observatory reveals that the country produced a 29.7% homicide rate. Alarmingly, the organization also shows that the country's homicide rate is estimated to be 20 times higher than the murders that occur in the United Kingdom per capita. Mr. Speaker, with this hurricane of unemployment growing ever stronger, the government is taking large steps towards reducing the effects of the storm. This is seen as in July 2018, the government agreed upon a $20 million loan from the Inter-American Development Bank for the execution of the Citizen Security and Justice Program, which would train vulnerable, unemployed youth, especially found in inner cities. Through this very program, the government in the same month signed an agreement with the National Training Agency in order to provide further training of unemployed youth on a wider scale. However, with these initiatives being carried out, can we really claim victory? Can we really claim victory since the annual GDP rate, according to the World Bank, has only risen to a mere 2.5% in the year 2018? Mr. Speaker, I cannot express the vast threat that this hurricane of youth unemployment poses on our country today. However, in the presence of any storm that poses a dire threat on our islands and keys, we, the people of the Bahamas, always strive to propose new strategies in order to beat them. In this case, in order to combat youth unemployment, we must first change our thinking. No one else on this entire planet can do this for us. Firstly, to do this, we must first make an effort to continue our economic expansion. Upon returning from college abroad, many young persons have come to find out that their newly specialized degree did not possess a market back home. Their degree literally meant nothing in the Bahamian business world, as many of the applicants were classified as being overqualified. Inevitably, this led to a brain drain in which many of these young persons emigrated to different countries, where their skills were now relevant and paid what it deserved. To combat the brain drain, I urge the public sector of society to partner up with the private sector and carry out a newfound form of investment that focuses on further harnessing the skills and talents of young persons that are needed. If combined investment from both the government and the corporation is carried out, we will create hundreds of jobs in well-needed industries such as engineering, entrepreneurship, and in particular, agriculture. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we must make an effort to push for educational reform. We must place further emphasis on subjects and areas of study that are becoming more relevant, not only on the Bahamian stage, but also on the world stage. Following the latest trends in the market, these subjects can range from information technology to data science, and are advised to be introduced into the public high school system as a part of the curriculum. By implementing this, we will be mentally preparing the child for the expanding and modernizing workforce of not only the Bahamas, but the world. Lastly, in order to combat youth unemployment, we must make an effort to enact social change. By collaborating with influential community-based programs, the government can further increase spending on social programs in poverty-stricken areas found in New Providence and, in particular, the Palmy Islands. Contrary to popular beliefs, these social programs will not be centered around getting free welfare checks, but more or less on the attainment of a job that productively improves the community as a whole. By getting young persons involved in these programs, we will be able to showcase that indeed, nothing is guaranteed nor handed to you on a silver platter. Mr. Speaker, every day a young person cannot obtain a job should be considered a day too many. Based on the statistics, we know that we still have a long way in being adequately prepared to combat this hurricane of unemployment. Mr. Speaker, I call upon all Bahamians to recognize that this is also our fight, as massive youth unemployment will place a massive strain on our social resources. Now, mind you, the fight will not be easy. However, like the previous hurricanes that have threatened to leave our island in peril, I am confident that, like always, the Bahamas shall overcome. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Isles.
Mr. Speaker, for recognizing me. I rise on behalf of the heart and soul of this country, the resilient constituency of Golden Isles. Mr. Speaker, I've grown older and I've realized that even the most beauteous paradise has shadows, and that one being unemployment. Mr. Speaker, the unemployment rate in this current climate sits at 12%. This is simply unacceptable. Not to mention the staggering percentage of unemployed young people is disastrous to the very fiber of our society. According to the resolution, the unemployment rate among youth aged 15 to 24 has slightly declined from 25.1% in November of 2016 to 24.1% in August of 2017. However, Mr. Speaker, I do not believe that I have to be Albert Einstein to at least tell you that these statistics are very high. Mr. Speaker, I share the same sentiment of the current minister. While being on 96.9 FM radio, the Political Review, he quoted, "The Prime Minister has given me instructions to ensure that no foreigner gets a permit where a Bahamian is available to do so." With that said, Mr. Speaker, it is my view that the government policy of Bahamian first must be in part. Where Bahamians can do the job, Mr. Speaker, we shall prefer them. Mr. Speaker, if we are going to be intentional about decreasing the unemployment rate, let us actually be intentional by intentionally reducing the amount of hired workers, foreign workers, where Bahamians are qualified and willing to do the job. Mr. Speaker, there's a need for a policy that promotes entrepreneurship in our family islands. Everyone recognizes the value of the Bahamas, except for us, Mr. Speaker. We of Disney wanted to invest in our family islands, Mr. Speaker. We have Dominicans continuously seeking our marine life. Mr. Speaker, I ask myself, what are we doing with our wealth? Grants and subsidies must be provided for Bahamians who want to develop their family islands, either by fishing, farming, or any other method outside of the Nassau, Mr. Speaker. We need to start asking ourselves questions like, will people purchase organic, homegrown pineapple deodorants or coconut cologne, Mr. Speaker? And if so, how much? There's so much room, earning potential for the Bahamas and Bahamians. But however, Mr. Speaker, in order to meet this potential, we must tap and support in our Bahamians' dreams, aspirations, and goals. Mr. Speaker, just 53 years ago, Singapore was a drug-infested, crime-ridden country where almost 70% of its people lived in slums and poverty. According to the Business Insider, today, Singapore ranks #1 in Asia for gross financial assets. It also ranks second for cities unemployment index 2017, an unemployment rate under 2%, Mr. Speaker, since 2017. Former Prime Minister once said, Mr. Leewee, the success of Singapore's is continual investment in its major natural resource. That is its people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do hope that we take a page out of their books by enforcing policies that reduce unemployment, that encourages entrepreneurship, and stimulate economic growth in our family islands, which would then prove, Mr. Speaker, that we truly put Bahamians first. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank Golden Isles, and I would like to thank the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Ms. Bimini, the chair wishes to recognize the honorable member for Nassau Village.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would first like to extend my gratitude and enthusiasm on having been selected into the House of Assembly today representing the constituency and its youth of Nassau Village. As the unemployment rate in the Bahamas remains considerably high, it has a circular effect that increases crime, resulting in an economy that is weakening and a reduction of opportunities, which increases their vulnerability to victimization. It is reasonable to assume that the lack of growth in the economy results in an increase in crime. Whereas the profile of the sentenced inmates at Her Majesty's Prison survey reported 40% of respondents advised that their crimes were committed due to economic reasons. To reduce the issue of youth unemployment, crime, and violence, the government has acquired $20 million to fund the Citizen Security and Justice Program specifically geared towards youth employment, training, and crime prevention. Of the $20 million, 20% will be allocated towards the youth unemployment component, which aims to increase the employability and employment amongst at-risk youth. The training will include soft, technical, specific skills training, along with remedial education. This responds to the survey conducted amongst employers within Nassau and Grand Bahama that have advised that this was the most important barrier. In the Department of Statistics' latest report, Work Permits Issued in the Bahamas, it was reported that about 9,000 work permits were issued, 67% being male recipients. Of those permits, 44% were granted in elementary occupational group level. The elementary occupational group level consists of simple and routine tasks which mainly requires the use of handheld tools and some physical effort. Examples are selling goods, cleaning, washing, simple farming, and hotels. It was reported the industry level that received the most permits were granted to accommodation and food services. Tell me, Mr. Speaker, if tourism is our #1 industry, why is that granted the most work permits? Being advised that 22,950 unemployed Bahamians at the beginning of this year was not employed, the challenge is now posed. Once trained and educated, where are they going to go? Once you have received the elementary job skills, the maximum amount of jobs that can be acquired with the reduction of work permits is 3,960. Currently, there are about 300 job postings online. That totals at around 4,260 jobs available. Being the accountant that I am, we were taught to overstate and not understate. So I will go as far as to say that there will be 6,000 jobs available when we reduce work permits. But what happens to the other 20,000? Sorry, what happens to the other 16,950 jobs? The solution to rectifying or at least mitigating youth unemployment, therefore, is twofold. To mitigate the need for this program and those alike, we must first confront the genesis of the issue it resolves. According to the most recent labor survey mentioned earlier, the barriers that employers face are specific skills training, behavioral skills, basic literacy and numeracy skills, lack of experience, and soft skills. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I ask that it is seriously undertaken that we review, analyze, and revamp our educational system to meet us here in this technological age. In regards to education, we are walking around with computers in our hands. Therefore, if I do not know how to do something, or if I don't know it, I have not Googled it yet. It is quite possible that the Yiddish proverb states, everyone is kneaded out of the same dough, but not baked in the same oven. We must embrace technology in our educational curriculum while considering that everyone is not the same. Once Google's education, it is not synonymous with intelligence. Therefore, therefore 70% of students that sat the carpentry and joinery BGCSE passed with the grade C or above, while only 26% that sat maths passed with a C or above. We must adapt to the change in our teaching and testing styles that complements the use of technology. Mr. Speaker, if I may pose to you the other component to assist in the reduction of youth unemployment is to increase the encouragement of entrepreneurship. The Bahamas is filled with many bright individuals. Imagine for a moment everyone is equipped with the skills necessary to get a job. The at-risk youth, there will not be enough jobs similar to the circumstance that we have now. With the reinforcement of entrepreneurship, we must remind our youth that they can create the jobs they once sought. Therefore, I applaud the movement, which is the Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Development Agency. Their aims of encouraging family island development, increasing GDP, increasing foreign direct investment through partnership, which is the main thing. Partnership with young Bahamian entrepreneurs is commendable. The Office of Evaluation and Oversight published that the Bahamas has borrowed $352.1 million within the span of 8 years from the International Development Bank. Further stating that of the $352.1 million approved that directly benefited the Bahamas, almost 43% went to finance transport projects. PFM received 9%, labor 7%, security 6%, trade 5%, and social protection 2%. SME, which is Small Medium-Sized Enterprises Development, received only 0.8% for 3 projects. Mr. Speaker, if my math serves me correctly, that is around $28 million. Although it was only reported that $25 million will be invested into these programs by a local newspaper, I urge the government to not shortchange this particular sector and encourage them to invest more in the Bahamians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ms. Bimini, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for North Eleuthera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of the wonderful, hard-working, and industrious people of the great constituency of North Eleuthera. From the fishing capital of the Bahamas, known as Spanish Wells, to the picturesque Glass Window Bridge and the historic Preacher's Cave, I stand before you to move that I agree with this resolution that is laid before us today. Kofi Annan said, and I quote, "Knowledge is power. Information is liberating. Education is the premise of progress in every society and every family." End quote. Mr. Speaker, while I concur that youth unemployment is high within our country, at the statistics of 24.1% as of August 2017, this is far too high for a country with a small population such as ours. The youth of the nation are our future. No, Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today and tell you that they are the now of our country. We must help to ensure that they have a country to call their own. We have positions that do become available, such as food and beverage managers, contractors, architects, and even event planners in the hotel industry. Many of these can be filled by Bahamian nationals, but instead work permits are issued for such jobs as these. Mr. Speaker, our Bahamian nationals can complete these jobs just as good, or even, may I say, sometimes better as their foreign counterparts. We have to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the Immigration Department goes around and inspects these businesses to ensure that the persons that are employed that are not Bahamian nationals do have the requisite work permits. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we are faced with high unemployment because many of our young people, sadly, are not qualified for some of the more complicated tasks, that thus limiting their job pool. This issue is being addressed partially by the partnership, which was stated earlier, by the Ministry of National Security and the training agency, namely the Peace and Justice Program, which signed an agreement on October 15th of this year. At that time, the Minister of National Security said, and I quote, "Today's contract signing is an excellent demonstration that the government fully understands the connection between unemployment and crime." He continued by saying, "The government remains concerned about the rate of unemployment in the Bahamas, in particular, the high rate of unemployment among our young people." End quote. I concur with Central and South Albuquerque as well as Centerville, that we as the youth of this nation have to stand up for those that have no voice. Some have fallen on hard times and cannot complete a tertiary level of education. As I am from Eleuthera, it would be remiss of me not to mention the contribution that the One Eleuthera Foundation, and namely the Center for Leadership for Training and Innovation, is having on the island. They have two different program types. The Learn to Earn program, in which students complete different courses, and they receive a stipend as well to assist them. As well as they have the second program known as the Professional Development Course. The record from CTI shows that a total of 17 persons are currently enrolled in the Learn to Earn program, and 22 completed it within the last year. While there have been numerous studies to suggest that unemployment has a direct correlation to violent crimes and thefts around the world, many may make the argument that some are unemployed because they are too lazy. While this may be the case for some, I know numerous individuals that are looking for jobs and just can't find any. Fortunately, for me, after I graduated from high school, within a 4-month period, I was employed at one of the premier financial institutions in this country. Unfortunately, after five years on the job, that particular branch closed. And I was then employed as a hotel clerk at a world-renowned hotel. These persons at these employment institutions believed in me that I, although I did not have any work experience, was capable of completing the task that was set before me. And needless I say, that I performed to the best of my ability. Persons like to say that crime is so high and that this is a lost generation. But they fail to realize that if this generation is truly lost, then they are the ones to blame. They are the ones that raised this generation. But I disagree with this statement, Mr. Speaker. This generation is the generation of change. This is the generation that will help to bring about the new Bahamas that we hear so much talk about. This is the generation that will indeed change the status quo. The young people of today will not only make a change within themselves, but they will use whatever platform they have, such as this youth parliament, to help effect the change that they desire to see in this country that they call home. Mr. Speaker, the time for us as a country to look very closely to the youth unemployment rate and to make changes to assist in the employment of our young people have long passed. But I commend the work of the government through BTVI and the National Training Agency.
Honorable Member for North Eleuthera, your time is expired.
I concur.
As many, the Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Go. Mr. Speaker, I am indeed grateful and honored for this rare opportunity to stand before this noble house and to represent the proud and resilient people of West Grand Bahama and Bimini. Mr. Speaker, I wholeheartedly and resoundingly support this resolution on behalf of our nation's struggling unemployed youth, and especially those of my constituency who are most adversely affected by the state of joblessness in this country. As you may already know, for many years now, we have literally and figuratively weathered some of the most fiercest and unrelenting storms to reach our beautiful yet fragile shores. But today, I am here to say that the good people of West Grand Bahama and Bimini are determined to rise from the ashes of economic stagnation. Yes, we are determined to make the move that will restore the West End groove. No longer will we be content to just lay low in Bimini. We believe that change must and will come. Mr. Speaker,
Despite the best efforts of government, the most recent labor force survey, which was released by the Department of Statistics for the period of November 2017 to May 2018, reveals the disturbing trend of an increase rather than the anticipated decrease in the overall unemployment rate. And the youth employment is up from 22.1% to 24%. Even more distressing, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that hundreds of young Bahamians who graduated high school and college just after this report have now joined the ranks who are still waiting to join the labor force even after 3, 4, 5 years because there are simply no jobs because of their inexperience and being denied access to gainful employment. How can we complain of a brain drain when even the more educated youth are often deemed to be overqualified and end up being unemployed and underpaid? It is any surprise that so many of our youth are refusing to return home after studying abroad? Sadly, during a recession, it is the young workers who are usually the first to be laid off or downsized. And many of those who remain in the informal sector have no formal contracts, no guarantee of regular work, and little or no right under the current labor laws. Think of the adverse effects this can have on our youth, both individually and collectively. Can you imagine the feeling of isolation, the loss of self-esteem, and the resentment that these young people will have towards the society that they believe has failed them? Research showed had proven over time youth unemployment can become a serious problem to the larger society. Just to survive, many resort to criminal and antisocial behavior that discourage potential tourists and investors. They may also withdraw entirely from the labor force and further reduce the future development of the economy. Mr. Speaker, such a state of affairs is completely unacceptable. Better must come. Why? Because unemployment is not only crucial to integrating young people into society, it is critical to our nation building. So, Mr. Speaker, while we are grateful for the recent initiatives taken by the government to revitalize the economy and create employment opportunities, we in West Grand Bahama and Bimini suggest a more comprehensive youth employment strategy which can sustain growth for the entire economy. We must ask ourselves, are we guiding youth towards the right range of technical skills and specialized services needed to meet the ever-changing demands of the world of technology in which we now live? Are we ensuring that the people are given priority in the creation and expansion of jobs? More importantly, are they being taught and given enough scope and resources to be self-employed, to own their own businesses, to become their own bosses? No country can progress without competent labor force. We can no longer afford to see our nation's youth as a liability, but as an asset that has to be fully involved in the productive process. By capitalizing the energy and vision of our ambitious and talented young people, whom, according to the United Nations, we ought to regard as today's partners rather than just tomorrow's leaders, because we are the youth at the forefront of change. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Pinewood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I believe it was a wise proverb that says, give a man a fish, you feed him today. Oh, but when you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the presence of God Almighty and the great and knowledgeable people of Pinewood. Mr. Speaker, fully understanding the resolution, whereas the unemployment rate among youth ages 15 to 24 in the Bahamas has remained considerably higher than any other age group, according to senior statistician at the Department of Statistics. Though there was a slight decline in the rate from 25.1% in November 2016, it remained as high as 24.1% in August of 2017. Mommy used to say, roses are red, violets are blue, sorcery ain't sweet, but neither is the truth. And the truth, Mr. Speaker, is that we are raising a generation of unequipped and unqualified young people to succeed in this ever-demanding society. Oh, but Mr. Speaker, the time has come. The time to revamp, redevelop, and revitalize this dreadful issue of unemployment among youth. Mr. Speaker, my first suggestion, if I may, for time is of the essence. I call on the Ministry of Education to not only invest in education, but to create avenues to cater to the importance of pathways of every person in this Commonwealth of the Bahamas. If we continue to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, that fish will go through life thinking that it was dumb. And so I stand tall to say that no Bahamian is dumb, Mr. Speaker. I could see the next Bill Gates from Managua, the next Steve Jobs from Abaco, the next Mark Zuckerberg from Bimini, and Mr. Speaker, my next Deputy Prime Minister from Andres. But furthermore, rather than allowing those skilled and qualified Bahamians to leave the comfort of their shores, we must now welcome expansion and innovation to accommodate these individuals, thus limiting the chance of brain drain. To make this step possible, we must analyze and assess the areas in which they thrive to adequately and efficiently provide them with the opportunities to thrive in their prospective careers. I think of the myriad of teachers leaving our shores to educate those abroad. We must avoid this by all means necessary. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand in agreement with the Member of Parliament for Pine Ridge that we must stop training Bahamians to be hired, but rather train them to hire. My point, Mr. Speaker, is that the future is bound to be bright once we invest and cater to the youth of our nation. If we don't start to invest, Mr. Speaker, who's going to fill those shoes? Who's going to stand that tall? And Mr. Speaker, who's going to help us all in all? Invest and cater today for a brighter tomorrow. May God bless this here Commonwealth in the Bahamas, and may we fly higher than flamingos, press on like blue marlins, and Mr. Speaker, may we bloom like the yellow elder. Thank you.
As many, Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am delighted today to stand before you all as a representative of the Bain and Grandstown constituency. I address the Constitution that says we are people and respect for spiritual values. So I dare to say, Mr. Speaker, in the time of the affliction of her people, Esther made herself known. So in the interim, Mr. Speaker, as Esther, I make myself known before you all in this honorable house today. I stand bold with grace and without fear to engage this validation for unemployment in the 17th session of Youth Parliament. 11 people, Mr. Speaker, and she made 12. This was the amount of people that were raised with her in a two-bedroom shack in Camp Road. The father was a drug user, so he had no care about his daughter. In fact, Mr. Speaker, he said she was bad just like the mother. And the mother retorted to the daughter, "You are good for nothing like the father." She was molesting, wandering alone outside to play. Her father and mother would physically abuse her, Mr. Speaker. She would walk bare feet some days down the hill to the public pump to get water to bathe. An epidemic of parasites. And the girl, she got anemia. So now she can empathize with her constituents in Bain Town that are suffering under the same problem. Mr. Speaker, she had a chance to get an associate's degree with clinical and skills. And she watched the Prime Minister on the news say that it's time to let the youth enter these sectors. So the Division of Labor came, and many people took an early retirement. And she hoped, Mr. Speaker, when she applied to PMH to get a job. But something happened. When she was told, "You are too overqualified." How can one be too overqualified on an associate's degree for a hospital job? Or even the fact mentioned, Mr. Speaker, how can one be too overqualified to serve in their own country, their own people, black majority in this country? So I come with a voice to represent my people for the Bain Town constituency. constituency as well as the nation of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, what is there left for her and others to do? What should we do, Mr. Speaker? They complain about prostitution. Should we all go there? They complain about a high rate of crime, Mr. Speaker. But should we all now knock on crime doors, being the reason for a high elevation of gang banging in our communities? Or should we fall into and leave us into the statistical poll of 24.1% amongst youth unemployed? Mr. Speaker, when I checked the Constitution, it speaks volumes to what our forefathers fought for. And it said that man, woman, or child would not be exploited by their later or frustrated. But Mr. Speaker, I was deprived. And Mr. Speaker, the lives of my people was frustrated. I come with a voice to stand for all, as I say, Mr. Speaker, and I suggest that the government, according to the Tribune, that stated in 2017 of May, signed a contract for $14.1 million to renovate the public hospital. Let the government expand on this act by industrializing and infrastructuring the equipment and bringing the hospital up to standard. What will this do? Technologized PMH hospital as well as the clinics with electronic systems. This will open jobs for technologists, clerks, administrators, and even for people to deal with environmental services, decreasing now the rate of unemployment. A level of equipment will need to be provided for this upgrade, so therefore employing engineers as well as electronic engineers, and even opening a mark to give contracts to contractors around the Bahamas to work on such a project. This will decrease the pool of unemployment. By this, even we can achieve accreditation for JCI, which is the Joint Commission International. This is an organization that works to improve patient safety and quality for healthcare, therefore branching the Bahamas healthcare sector to an international community, offering education, publication, advisory services, and international accreditation and certification. By this will branch this nation off, that more people will hear about us on the news and on social media. Seems now the connection of what youths and now people seem to presume, and therefore people will begin to hear more about the Bahamas and flock here. This will take a toll now even on tourism, seeing that we will now be advertised more often and even bring in more investors for the country, what the current government is now proclaiming that they are seeking after. Capitalize on our family islands. Thank you so much. I concur.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Barnabas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for acknowledging me. Mr. Speaker, I stand at this lecture today in the presence of both God and man, with the esteemed pleasure of representing the wonderful and dynamic constituents of St. Barnabas, who have allowed me to sit in this honorable chamber today. Mr. Speaker, my contribution in this noble house 17th session of Youth Parliament today, is built upon the Youth and Unemployment Resolution. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to elaborate further on the Youth and Unemployment Resolution. Mr. Speaker, I'll quickly address the education in the Bahamas in terms of unemployment. If we as a people don't have a backbone of education, how can we be employed in a real business field? Oftentimes, the youth is unemployed because they do not have the proper and up-to-standard education to work. Mr. Speaker, the schools of the Bahamas should create extra academic programs to help the youth pass its own foreign examination, its own examinations such as BJC and BJCSE and etc. The youth will pass these examinations and be equipped once they have already graduated from high school. But Mr. Speaker, let's remember this term. You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot, I repeat, you cannot force he or she to drink. Mr. Speaker, many young people are unemployed because some don't have the education that is pertinent and palpable jobs in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the youth are unemployed because there aren't many jobs in the Bahamas for everyone. Why? Because the population in the Bahamas has increased, which in being, we should teach our youth how to strive to become an entrepreneur. More jobs will be assembled in the Bahamas, whether if the students want to become a mechanic, singer, doctor, lawyer. The school should implement an internship hour under the desired career fields over a summer break. That way, we will be forcing all youngins to engage in a career so that the youth will be less likely to drop out of school and become a riffraff. Because being enrolled in a summer program such as so, the youth will be more likely to employ when they have already left school, I repeat. Mr. Speaker, third but not least, many youth are unemployed because in the Bahamas land, you are judged by your profession and where you work. Some fields have this interpretation that only men should work on a construction site. And females should position themselves in a banking, business, hair, and nails makeup field. Which is not equitable. That is a mentality from people makes our youth do not want to work because they are not comfortable because of the judgment by the people in our nation today. We should empower our youth to execute whatever career they would like to fulfill and not be ashamed and laid back. Mr. Speaker, you may ask, why are more young people in the 20th century unemployed? Because I repeat, there aren't any jobs for the youth to be employed. And some people are very lazy. Mr. Speaker, the rate of youth being unemployed has tremendously risen since 2004. Mr. Speaker, in May of 2017, according to American Bank, the unemployment rate among young people in the Bahamas has risen as high as 30%. And that is not making the Bahamas look any better. Mr. Speaker, the youth being unemployed has to stop. I repeat, has to stop. Mr. Speaker, the government now is speculating on which they should allow Disney World to come and create a business at the lighthouse in Eleuthera. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you one thing. If they are really brilliant and educated like they say they are, they would allow the Disney World to do so because this will provide hundreds of jobs for Bahamians, and not only Bahamians, our youth. Mr. Speaker,
Honorable Member for St. Barnabas, your time has expired.
Thank you. May God bless the country and our nation.
Ms. Bimini, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Tall Pines.
Young, dumb. Young, dumb, and broke. Young, dumb. Young, dumb, and broke. I'm so young, dumb, and broke. This song has seemed to be the anthem of our youth, as they think they are, Mr. Speaker, young, dumb, and broke. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I stand before you as the youth representative for the Tall Pines constituency. I stand before you as the forefront of change. It is here that I will discuss the ample amount of ways we can improve the unemployment rate and decrease the crime rate, as the young, unemployed youth are the driving force for the increase in crime in our Bahama land. I pause to highlight the Citizen Security and Justice Program, whose mandate is to reduce the crime by increasing employment. Once employment is up, crime is down. According to statistics.org, youth unemployment rate in the United States is an overall 7.3%. This is indeed a drastic comparison to the Bahamas, where the youth unemployment rate, according to the Department of Statistics, is an overall booming 24.1%, Mr. Speaker, 24.1%. Mr. Speaker, this is indeed an issue, and not a small one at that. First, in solving, let us encourage entrepreneurship. It is a common saying that the youth of the Bahamas are aimlessly aiming to work at Breezes or Bahama and own a Honda Accord. I beg to differ, Mr. Speaker. Youth want to explore and create. The problem now is simply money. Money, money, money. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. It makes the world go around. Let us encourage our youth to own businesses and be entrepreneurs by investing in them, Mr. Speaker. We have been effortlessly giving out scholarships for years and years. Why not do the same for young entrepreneurs? Let's invest in the innovative business ideas that they have. Starting a business can cost as little as $2,000 to $10,000. Let's make it so that it is a work that at least 40% of the employees have started working at these said companies from the ages of 18 to 24. If Germany, Japan, and the United States can do it, why can't we? Mr. Speaker, I make this plea to the young men of our country. Put down your guns. Dissolve yourself from gang affiliations and solve your conflicts in a peaceful and harmonious manner. Crime is you, me, the dog, the cat, the rat, everybody's business. Secondly, I reach my next point of discussion, Mr. Speaker, which regards the education of our youth. At Bahamian government schools, which makes up the vast majority of our student population, educational options are limited. There are art classes, science classes, and even cosmetic classes. But I raise the question, Mr. Speaker, where are the other options? It is discouraging to our youth, especially those who are not academically inclined, when they realize that there are no agricultural or technical options for them to be a part of. Let's take the BTVI approach and connect our students to more appropriate options. While we do this, we must also realize that our youth are not often employed because of a lack of experience. Mr. Speaker, it is time we give our youth a chance to gain more experience than simply 1 month of job readiness. We must reach out to companies, local and abroad, connecting them to schools and starting apprenticeship programs from as early as the 8th grade. This not only creates experience, but also forms bonds that will likely end up in aiding the youth to attain more jobs, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I wish to touch on what was previously stated. In order to encourage the youth to have jobs, we must destroy the stigma that surrounds education. Nowadays, education isn't cool. In the words of the youth, it ain't cool to read no book, but it's cool for me to post up a picture in my Honda Accord. Mr. Speaker, by expanding our school-based options, investing in entrepreneurship, and modernizing our educational techniques, we are able to increase the rate of employment in our youth. And not only that, we can destroy the never-ending cycle of crime that stems from our youth being uneducated and unemployed. In the mindset of, because I ain't smart, I can't get a job. And because I can't get a job, I can't afford those Jordans. And because I can't afford those Jordans, I'm going to steal those Jordans. And because I can't steal those Jordans, I'm going to kill for those Jordans. Will be completely obliterated and destroyed. Look at me, Mr. Speaker. Look at me. The first step starts with you and me. You and me. To the little girl with the big dreams who wants to be the first female prime minister. To the little boy who does not want to drive a Honda but a BMW. We, you, I am the forefront of change. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member from Mount Moriah.
That you grant me an additional 30 seconds, as I believe that it is important that I flesh out my reasonings for the roots of unemployment and discuss the citizen security policy. As a representative for Mount Moriah, I rise to inform you of the issues faced by Bahamians in regards to its high unemployment rate of young persons and to address the citizen security and justice policy, which is a contributing factor to remedy the societal problem. Let's begin with a few basic facts. Unemployment rates of youth ages 15 to 24 is at 24.1%. There was a financial crisis in 2008. There was an increase in the unemployment rate by 5% within 6 years, between the years of 2007 to 2013. In essence, it may be fair to hypothesize that there is a correlation between the global financial crisis and an increase in youth unemployment. I stand here to put forth my position that the high rate of youth unemployment is correlated to the increased crime. I will indicate to you my root problems that spur youth unemployment, its implications, and its relation to crime. I will also provide an analysis and criticism of the present policy model, the Citizen Security and Justice Program, which attempts to reduce the correlation between youth unemployment and crime. And lastly, I'll provide recommendations to the program's improvement. Youth Unemployment and Employment Policy, written by Niall Hogan, meticulously theorizes possible problems that lead to high rates of youth unemployment. It speaks to the skill level, aggregate demand for labor, youth wages, and the size of labor force as determining factors for employment. Today, I will just address the aggregate demand for labor. The most prevalent determinant of youth employment is the aggregate demand for labor. As there is a downfall in the demand for labor, there's a fall in employment. This posits the question, why does the aggregate demand for employment affect youth disproportionately? Answers to this question include, young persons leave their jobs more frequently and voluntarily. It is less consequential for employers to terminate young persons as they have fewer skills. It is less consequential to the young person as there is less of a need for a job. This is evidenced by the 1998 Asian crisis, whereby 75% of youth terminations were voluntary quits. This crisis also implied that young persons are more likely to leave their job even during a recession. In a recession, employers first reduce recruitment. As many young persons have recently entered the working field, they are majorly looking for employment and consequently adversely affected by the recession. These factors indicate that the leading factor of youth unemployment is an inadequate demand for labor. Attention needs to be focused on the demand and supply of the youth labor market, where there can be an effort made to creating growth in the economic market and improving its skilled content. To my next point, the relation between unemployment and an increase in crime is supported by data in the Sustainable Development Working Paper, Youth Violence in Latin America and the Caribbean. It posits that 80% of violent crimes are committed by men, whom the majority of are under 35. A Jamaican participatory urban appraisal found high unemployment rates led men to frustration and idleness, which also led to increase in gun violence, interpersonal conflict, and domestic violence. And for women, high unemployment resulted in economic dependency on men and increased domestic violence. It in turn brings about a spiral effect. An increased cost to repair destroyed physical assets and destroys human lives. It affects the nation's expenditure as it requires more resources for criminal justice, incarceration, and the health department. Violence brought forth by crime ultimately affects youth labor, their human and societal capital, and any productive assets they have. Violence limits persons' access to jobs by reducing employment opportunities in the crime-ridden community. With less human capital, access to education and health facilities are limited. It reduces trust and cooperation amongst community corporations, and it destroys any physical assets, like the destruction of housing. The fewer assets a person has, the more likely they'll turn to alternative means to survive. This in turn perpetuates and erodes assets in households and communities. In addressing policies to reduce violent crime and increase youth employment, I want to specifically address the Citizen Security and Justice Program, which provides an objective to reduce the number of youth-related crime in communities, improve job readiness for youth, and increase judicial case resolutions.
Honorable from Mount Moriah, your 30 seconds has expired as well.
Thank you.
As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South Beach.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I deem it an honor and a privilege to represent the illustrious people of the South Beach constituency on such a timely topic. As we know, words can be powerful and divisive, but the purpose of my words today will not be to impress you with sophisticated vocabulary or the soaring rhetorical or oratory, but my singular purpose is to articulate the plight of our young people in our Bahama land, with the view that we as a collective body can sensitize our government to take a more aggressive approach in combating one of the many vexing issues facing our young people, unemployment. Be it therefore resolved that we, the members assembled at this 17th session of the Bahamas Annual National Youth in Parliament, will debate the challenges, concerns, and benefits of implementing policies that affect youth unemployment in the Bahamas, and to offer viable possible policies and legislation to improve employment for youth in this country. I wish to outline first the gravity of this vexing problem of youth unemployment in the Bahamas, so we can all fully appreciate the magnitude of this problem and seek to bring about meaningful resolutions. The specific definition of youth in this context are ages 15 to 24, according to a senior statistician of the Department of Statistics. According to this statistician, the youth unemployment in the Bahamas has remained considerably higher than any other age group. Mr. Speaker, someone once said, figures don't lie, but liars figure. Facts indeed are stubborn. Here are some glaring stats from the Department of Statistics that shares light on this issue. Youth unemployment was as high as 24.1% in August of 2017. In May of 2017, the Inter-American Development Bank reported that the unemployment rate among young people in the Bahamas peaked as high as 30%. These figures are indeed alarming and underscore the need to seriously do more to stem this vexing problem. What are some of the possible solutions, you may ask? Let us examine our fellow Caribbean country, Cuba. Despite the fact that the Bahamas is much more economically stable than Cuba, their educational system is far superior than ours. The Cuban government, with its limited resources, has been able to invest in the education of its people. With a literacy rate of over 98% and one of the world's best entities in terms of health, treatment, and medicine, there's a lot we can learn from a country that has placed value in enhancing the educational and vocational skills of its people. Mr. Speaker, increasing the youth unemployment rate requires us to add infrastructural changes to our curriculum. Like the Honorable Member for Nassau Village alluded to, many young Bahamians are borderline addicted to their smart devices and computers. There is no reason for us to avoid implementing more educational videos, apps, websites, and social media initiatives that marry something that students prefer to do with something that is necessary for their advancement. The important thing is to monitor where their interests are and focus on it. Instead of rebuking them and having those interests, we incorporate them in innovative and educational opportunities. The Bahamas has to consider in investing in the true passions of young Bahamians in terms of giving those that are talented in the fields of art, music, drama, comedy, public speaking, etc., the opportunity to pursue and develop careers in what they love. Why must young Bahamians go overseas to find a job in such areas? We must create the market for those aesthetic skills. Why is it that in Jamaica, budding, aspiring young persons can find a career in the field of entertainment and make a comfortable living? Don't believe me? Ask persons like Lady Saw or Beanie Man, who all started their careers at a very young age and have paved the way for many young aspiring artists. So perhaps we should consider creating more events and innovative job positions that allow talented Bahamians to express their true passion, because this will contribute to the continuation and expansion of our cultural identity. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, we as a country can use our fertile minds to find a solution and seriously implement those that are feasible to combat youth unemployment. By investing in our youth, we are investing in the most precious resource given to us. Thank you. God bless the constituents of South Beach, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Yamacraw.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Today I stand before you as a humble representative of the constituency of Yamacraw. As a young person in this great country of the Bahamas, I am disappointed in government officials coming to us year after year, lying to us about job opportunities that they promised to create and never create them for us. The issue of unemployment in the people of the country is a socioeconomic socio-economic crisis that is crippling the economy of the Bahamas. Too many young people year after year are left unemployed, and the government of the Bahamas is not doing anything to promote jobs or to create jobs for young people in this country. As a developing nation, we must get on board with more progressive and more economic revolutionary
Point of order.
techniques.
Honorable member for Yamacraw, do not make such bold accusations. Continue.
I'm not, pardon?
Do not make any bold accusations. Point of order. Continue.
My accusations weren't bold, they're fact. According to the International Labour Organization, there are about 71 million unemployed people globally. And as of 2017, the unemployment rate in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas remained as 24%. In order for us to change, there has to be three key elements to create this change. There must be a restructuring of the government system in regard to education, a collaborative approach to organizations and employment, as well as entrepreneurship programs being promoted. Unemployment has remained a serious issue for young people in the Bahamas. Every year, the unemployment rate of this country continues to increase. Year after year, school systems produce hordes of illiterate and enumerate Bahamians who do not graduate with the basic math or English skills. Studies produced by the World Economic Forum states that 40% of employers find it difficult to recruit people because they are simply unqualified. Studies have shown, Mr. Speaker, that the Ministry of Education has produced 2% passing rates in the standardized examinations. Year after year, Mr. Speaker, it is just like a car that isn't working. Do you continue to ride the car without it being fixed, or do you fix the problem before it crashes? Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Education and the government of Bahamas seems to only want us to be maids and waiters and hospitality slaves and let large corporations come into this country and treat us unfairly, lay us off, and increase to unemployment annually. There is time for us to more collaborative approaches.
The chair acknowledges the member for Long Island.
Referencing the non-factual statements made by the honorable member of Yamacraw pertaining to the topic that the government does absolutely nothing to promote jobs. I do not disagree with that, and I'm sure many other honorable members
do not disagree with that?
I do not agree with that because the government does many things, many things. And you cannot make such a bold statement without percentages, statistics.
If you let me finish, then you would get percentages.
Point of order, member for Yamacraw, allow Long Island to finish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Continue, Yamacraw.
Thank you. There has to be a focus and there has to be a collaborative approach inside educational system that collaborates with a focus on a balance between academics as well as technical vocational fields so that students are graduate and be able to be entrepreneurs in their respective fields. Not everyone is designed to be a lawyer, not everyone is designed to be a doctor. There are plumbers, there's a lot of fields in technical fields that can be explored. The great honorable of Nassau Village, or member of Nassau Village, is an entrepreneur. Young people have to hire each other. We need to start to be entrepreneurs, to hire other young people around us instead of waiting on the government to create opportunities for us. As young people in this country, we must stand and we must help each other. And that is the only way that we can truly get change. There has to be a connect in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas between private businesses and as well as a collaborative approach with private institutions to now create training programs to allow us to now be trained in positions.
Honorable member for Yamacraw, your time is expired. Thank you. For further information in this House, bold statements should not be made without proper factual basis, as member for Long Island reiterated. Osmani? Chair recognizes the honorable member from Marco City.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to express how elated I am to represent the exuberant and vibrant members of the great Marco City. The petition for a productive and secure labor force of our vivacious youth. For a population well below 500,000 inhabitants, our archipelago should not experience a youth unemployment rate of 24.1%, nor should it allow 50% of its youth to be unemployed for more than a year either. Mr. Speaker, we must ascend from beneath the ashes of fragmented workforce development policies and soar beyond the barricades of poor education, work ethic, and crime. The Bahamas is ranked second in the entire Caribbean for highest youth unemployment rate, and this is a reality Marco City prefers not to accept. In Grand Bahama particularly, This rate is a whopping 12.4%, the highest in the entire country. And this is really ironic, as we are the industrial capital of the Bahamas. This statistics as such prove that the Bahamas is going in a downward spiral economically because of the many defects brought about by the high youth unemployment rate. Having analyzed global trends pertaining to the proposed solution, it has occurred that the European Union, the EU, is a world leader in youth employment, with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland at the forefront. Who's to say that the Bahamas couldn't plausibly align itself with such a successful employment policy? By the same token, the rather viable policy model this state needs to decrease its youth unemployment has emerged. Marco City's contribution to this employment revitalization lies within the establishment of the Bahamas Youth Employment Initiative, BYEI. This framework will act as a structural employment reform encompassing parallel education and its attendant legislature to achieve a remarkable and irrevocable decline in Bahamian youth unemployment. As aforementioned, it will be a structural employment reform unique to the Bahamas, and it will serve as an essential measure as far as regulatory frameworks are concerned, because it is designed to ensure that this economy is fit to embrace its growth potential in an equitable way. Malcolm X rightly stated, "Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today." We are the future, and because we are at the forefront of change, we have no choice but to prepare for it today. So why not adequately equip us with the tools to make change? Mr. Speaker, a clear pattern in successful youth employment has become obvious to me. You see, the mass majority of the EU countries with the lowest youth employment rates worldwide all have one thing in common, which I believe is the code we need to crack in order to triumph over youth unemployment, and that is parallel education. This strategy, mastered by Germany, has proven to be so effective that it landed its annual youth unemployment rate at 6.8%, which is the current lowest in the EU. Countries such as Canada have readily adopted this notion and has raced ahead in implementing it. Mr. Speaker, the implementation of an extensive dual education system that combines subsidized classes at vocational institutes such as BTVI with the on-the-job apprenticeship training will ease the labor market in so many ways. High school students would be allowed to apply to firms for temporary paid positions where they would divide their time between work and mastering a curriculum specially adapted to the demands of the industry. This curriculum would include 350 different career paths requiring specialized skills so that our young Bahamians...
Honorable member from Nassau City, your time has expired.
Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member from Baikal.
Mr. Speaker, it is a pleasure for me to stand here today in representation for one of the most prestigious constituencies. I am delighted to elaborate on a topic that has been a stagnant epidemic affecting the youth of this nation for years. Mr. Speaker, as the Honorable Speaker of Acklins alluded to, we cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. Youth unemployment is a cause for concern, if only because many of the young people have not yet had the opportunity to join the labor force, and as such are being denied access to gainful employment, which is considered by many social scientists as the traditional youth to the process of social integration. Mr. Speaker, high youth unemployment is not peculiar to the Bahamas. Indeed, it is now recognized as a global phenomenon which is adversely impacting both developed and developing countries. Mr. Speaker, several studies on the subject have suggested that prolonged periods of unemployment among young people tend to lead to a reduction of diminished levels of well-being and a sense of isolation from peer groups. The youth unemployment rate, encompassing persons aged between 15 to 24 years old, rose over the 6-month period from 2.1% to 24.1%. Mr. Speaker, in this age bracket, which is typically exhibits the highest jobless rate, more than 1 in 5 Bahamians looking for work and cannot find it. Now, Mr. Speaker, discouraged workers, meaning persons who have stopped seeking work because they believe none is available, increased by 6.9%. The Bahamas needs a more significant focus on economic growth to further dent a national unemployment rate that remains stubbornly flat and high. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, a popular explanation for the age distribution of crime is that youth are exposed to unemployment. Economists have hypothesized that joblessness triggers frustration and anger, which in turn may lead to violent behavior. Mr. Speaker, it is also suggested that unemployment provides individuals with more time and opportunities to commit crime. But, Mr. Speaker, the government of the Bahamas has borrowed $20 million to fund the Citizen Security and Justice Program. The launch of this program signals a step in the right direction.
Honorable for my call, your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment is a great tragedy. The man who goes about hopelessly seeking work in order to earn bread for his family is a living reproach to civilization. So often do I hear the complaints of my fellow youth. I myself can attest to this. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed my esteemed gratitude to advocate on the behalf of the great people of Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador. I rise to voice my opinions on the resolution for initializing more job opportunities catering to the youth of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We, the future, the forefront of change. What is a problem without a solution? Youth unemployment is a worldwide issue. We need jobs and we need it now. There are various factors that contribute to the employment of many youth, such as education, economic growth, lack of resources, just to name a few. Mr. Speaker, my people are greatly in need of employment. How are they to feed their families? We are facing obstacles which are greatly supplying us with setbacks, which is not allowing us to be superlative. The rate of persons being deemed unemployed is spreading like wildfire. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, according to the global economy, youth unemployment is the distribution of labor force between the ages of 15 to 24 without jobs who are available and searching for work. Statistics have shown that from the year 2011, there has been a steady increase in unemployment among youth. It seems as if this is a difficult problem to rectify, or the government is conducting inertia among youth. When looking at this problem, do not think about the qualifications that one may have, but the difficulty that we may have brought forth to establish oneself, even when the qualifications are present. Year after year, the confidence and ability of youth are measured by the grade of an exam that was not written in our own country by our own, who to some extent know their abilities. Many have completed university, obtaining various degrees, to discover that still there's a short supply of jobs available. Others are left with the burden of being overqualified for the job. Yet, why question the problem of youth unemployment? Mr. Speaker, the risk of standing still is greater than those of moving forward in a new direction. In addition, encouraging more persons to become innovative allows them the opportunity to implement small startup businesses, which will aid in providing jobs to many unemployed persons. Furthermore, the mental and physical depression state of unemployment is laid on youth rather than addressing and fixing the pressing issue. It is logical to establish counter-rebuttals.
Honorable member for Cat Island, Rum Cay, and San Salvador.
Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak on behalf of the great constituents of the Elizabeth constituency. I speak on a resolution about unemployment in the youth of the Bahamas. Underqualified, overqualified, no experience, too much experience. We are not high right now, but we are calculator. These are some of the words that constantly echoes into the ears of the youth of the Bahamas. In our country, the issue surrounding unemployment is not one that has just come around. In the year 2001, the unemployment rate in the Bahamas was 14.9%. In the year 2013, we noticed a dramatic increase from 14.9% to 32.3%. Although this declined to 25.1 in November 2016, a further decline to 24.1 in August of 2017. This is something that seriously has to be addressed. When speaking about unemployment, we must first dissect this to determine the root cause behind this problem. In the Citizens and Security Justice Program, youth unemployment is said to be associated with social causes like lack of school attachment in adolescence. Upon my dissection of this in the youth and my consultation with the youth in my constituency, it was discovered that the most common causes of unemployment in the Bahamas were lack of education, crime and security issues, and the feeling of entitlement amongst the youth in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, it is a shame that many youth in our country are losing interest in school after completing junior high school. The question remains, what are we doing to address this? To answer this question, I asked some of the young people in my constituency, why is it that you find it so hard to find interest in school? Some replied by saying that school simply is not for them. Mr. Speaker, why is it that we haven't revamped our education system to include those who are not trying to be doctors, lawyers, or hoteliers in our society? We must include those who are left brain, right brain, and those who are good with their hands and those who are good with books. Mr. Speaker, another issue contributing to unemployment in the Bahamas is the fact that crime and security problems are even more prevalent than poverty and inequality. According to the International Monetary Fund, youth unemployment and crime are a part of a vicious cycle that weakens the growth of a country. Weak growth reduces economic opportunities for the young, therefore increasing vulnerability to victimization of gang membership. Each day as we drive past the schools in our constituencies, we see our young men fighting, young ladies cursing, and the morals that once stood strong barely non-existent. Mr. Speaker, it is time that we take in the rear and take back our constituencies. It is time that we take back the young people and fight back this dark cloud that stands over the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, it is time that we take back the youth. It is time that we free youth unemployment. And Mr. Speaker, it is time that we do like Tasha Cobb said, break every chain and every shackle that holds this Bahama land. Thank you.
As many. The chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Abaco, North Abaco.
Mr. Speaker, I stand as a representative of one of the distinguished and most worthy constituencies of the Bahamas. If you look at me and see an individual, you are wrong. I am more than that. I am a representation of my school, my community, my island. And today, I am here to discuss the making of our youth employment program policies. Before we even examine these factors, we must confabulate the root causes for why such policies are needed. The root causes will consist of the foundational core issues that give rise to the symptoms we now see today, unemployment and crime. On behalf of the people of North Abaco, Mr. Speaker, my constituency that I love so dearly, at this tender age of 15, my eyes have seen enough. If we are truly to move forward as a nation, there must be changes in our existing youth employment policy. As history has taught us, we have come from a pirate society and we are here now because we want to prevent this from happening again. We have young people in our country whom I believe are not being steered in the right direction. Let me elaborate, Mr. Speaker. I would hear stories from my grandmother of a time when they would not only be punished by their parents, but by other members in the community if they were discovered doing wrong. During that era, it took a village to raise a child. Society has evolved. We have lost this type of support.
and discipline is no longer the order of the day. As a result, we have children who do not fear the police officers, they don't respect those who are in authority, and this just shows how society now lacks morals and has lost the knowledge of how to raise children properly. When the parents fail to bring up their children, they tend to go in the wrong direction. The youth are not encouraged to stay in school anymore, so it results in them not graduating, becoming high school dropouts. This causes them to be unqualified and work low-level jobs. We need to provide laws and policies to educate parents about child rearing, to offer guidance and assistance to single parents, and to hold parents accountable when they fail to provide the basic psychological, physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of children. Another problem that the students on my island face that will result in unqualified workforce is related to basic human rights. Students born to non-Bahamian parents do not have the opportunities to work and get their proper education because of established immigration laws and policies. As a result of this, it seems as if our minority populations are not given fair chances. My island is a very diverse island, Mr. Speaker. In my homeroom class at the school that I attend, which is the great S.E. Woodle High School, 58% of the students are of Haitian descent. Many of these students do not know which country they belong to. And sadly, they will not be able to qualify for jobs, scholarships, or even enroll in universities. We must put the prejudice aside and look at the big picture, Mr. Speaker. The quickest way to form a ghetto is to deny people their rights and to equal employment. When you want to make something successful, of course there are going to be challenges. Although different, they unquestionably delay the process.
Honorable for North Abaco, your time.
Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded that the following resolution be agreed to. Whereas the unemployment rate among youth 15 to 24 in the Bahamas has remained considerably higher than any other age group, according to a senior statistician at the Department of Statistics. Though there was a slight decline in the rate from 25.1% in November 2016, it remained as high as 24.1% in August 2017. Be it resolved that the members assembled of this 17th session of the Bahamas' annual National Youth Parliament has debated the challenges, concerns, and benefits of implementing policies that affect youth employment in the Bahamas. Consider the root causes for why such policies must even be debated and offered viable possible policy models in its intended legislation to improve employment for youth in this country. And be it further resolved, this youth parliament has recognized that youth unemployment is a part of a vicious cycle that leads to increased rates of crime, slowed economic growth, and brain drain, affecting the young and old alike. Now, the adequate and progressive steps must be taken to mitigate and reverse the effects of youth unemployment in all sectors of Bahamian society. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion has been carried. Further resolutions?
Mr. Speaker, I, the Honorable Member for Pinewood, move that the business of this House be suspended to 3 p.m.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that the business of this House be suspended to 3 p.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated, and those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of this House is suspended to 3 p.m. Please sustain your seats. At this point, the Deputy Speaker will now address National Youth Parliament.
Good afternoon, Honorable Junior Youth Parliamentarians of the future. It's a pleasure, really, to join the Speaker in welcoming you here and watching the excitement, the dynamics of tomorrow's politicians and leaders in general. I just want to reiterate and thank the Ministry of Youth and Sports and Culture, and particularly Ms. Kayla Brown Roca, who has led this charge. And I must say that Ms. Brown Roca, you could take back to the ministry that the parliamentarians of this country, we are very proud of what we've seen here thus far. The resolution this morning surely was one of great importance to the Bahamas. And it's definitely Carla Brown Parker, sorry. Roca. I normally get my names right. But thank you. But I think the resolution was indeed a timely one, given where we are in terms of employment and where we are in terms of youth development in our country. I was saddened by the fact that the member for Abaco, I think was the last speaker, North Abaco. I was hoping to hear more of a speech because I think as these opportunities present, it brought out something that needs to be addressed, and you are the future leaders of tomorrow. All Bahamians, I think you heard her loud and clear. We have to fight for all Bahamians. And as young people, you're the future, and I'm sure that we'll be able to address and deal with that particular challenge sooner than later. I'd also like to thank my colleagues that joined us earlier today. You have heard from the Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Member of Parliament for Nassau Village, Honorable Housen Moultrie. You have seen in this place the Member of Parliament for Golden Isles, the Honorable Vaughn Miller. We've also seen the Member of Parliament for Pinewood, His Excellency Reuben Ramming. We've seen the Member for South and Central Andros, the Honorable Picewell Forbes. You've seen the Member for Bain and Grandstown, the Honorable Travis Robinson. The Member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, the Honorable Pakeisha Parker. Don't be surprised if you see other members of Parliament joining you in your second debate this afternoon. I think it's on mental illness. That too is a very important topic, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. I want to end by saying that I was in the Cayman Islands a few months ago at a a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association conference, and there was a youth in Parliament, young people from all over the Commonwealth, particularly the Caribbean, was there. They were there and they debated a resolution. No Bahamians joined us on that trip. I say that to say, please pull on your members of Parliament's coattails and tell them that we want no conferences for young youth parliamentarians to carry out in the Commonwealth especially without a Bahamian there. So that's the challenge. So again, congratulations, and I look forward to hearing the rest of our honorable members give their debate later this evening. But before rising, I must be biased and say to the member for Tall Pines, you could really take your seat. I thought I was going to speak from my seat, because the rules do permit in the House you speak from your seat. The rules do permit in the House that you wear a jacket. The rules do permit that when the Speaker speaks, you be quiet and you allow him to speak. And I listened with interest some of the, particularly I think one of the members on the government side. So thank you very much. The member for Tall Pines, continue to do well. All members continue to do well. Thank you very much, members.
This House stands suspended until 3 p.m.